Hi guys, tonight we're stepping into the misty beginnings of tea, the small green leaf that somehow learned to sit at the centre of medicine, ritual, poetry, trade, and eventually entire empires. Imagine a mountain slope at dawn. The air is silver with fog, water murmurs over stone. Somewhere nearby, a clay pot warms above a small fire, and a few leaves tremble in the breeze like they already know they're about to become famous. How does one drink begin as a humble herbal infusion and end up reshaping continents? How does something so quiet become so powerful? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and as you get comfortable, tell me in the comments where you are listening from and what your local time is right now. Maybe it is midnight in Manila, dusk in Dublin, or 3 a.m. in Toronto, when decisions are famously questionable. Now, dim the lights, and you find yourself standing in ancient China, long before tea has a global name, long before porcelain cups, silver spoons, clipper ships, and polite arguments about milk. You're in a landscape of wet earth and low clouds, somewhere in the broad world of early Chinese farming communities, where mountains lift softly in the distance and the valleys breathe with the smell of damp soil, wood smoke, and crushed plants. The path beneath your feet is uneven. It presses through your thin shoes. Bamboo creaks gently in the wind. A rooster calls from a courtyard. Somewhere, someone is grinding grain with a slow stone rhythm, patient as sleep. Tea is not yet the refined drink of scholars. It is not yet the companion of poets or emperors. It is a leaf among many leaves, noticed by people who live close to plants because they must. In this world, survival depends on remembering which roots soothe the stomach, which berries are dangerous gas, which bark eases pain, and which leaves can keep the eyes open during long hours of work. A plant is never just a plant. It is a question, and sometimes an answer. You walk toward a small settlement where baskets hang under the eaves to dry. Herbs are tied in bundles. The air smells green and sharp, with hints of smoke from cooking fires and the faint mineral scent of rain waiting in the clouds. Older hands sort leaves by touch, not by labels. Smooth, leathery, bitter, fragrant. Knowledge lives in fingers as much as in words. The plant that will become known as Camellia sinensis grows naturally in parts of southern China and neighbouring regions, especially in warm, humid hills where mist settles comfortably among the branches. That is the mainstream fact beneath the legends. Tea belongs first to a botanical world of forests, uplands, and careful observation. It is not invented in a palace. It is found, tested, remembered, and slowly trusted. At first, you might not call it tea at all. You might see it boiled with other herbs, eaten as a vegetable, or used as a tonic. Early tea was likely bitter, earthy, and strong. It was closer to medicine than comfort. You lift a rough bowl toward your face and breathe in steam that smells of leaves, rainwater, and clay. The taste is not sweet. It pulls at the tongue. It is grassy, slightly astringent, a little stern, like a very ancient teacher who has no interest in flattering you. And yet, it does something. Your mouth clears, your body feels warmed from within, your thoughts become a little sharper. Around you, the room remains quiet, but not empty. There is the soft crack of firewood, the scrape of a ladle, the rustle of woven sleeves. Someone nods, as if to say, yes, this leaf has use. A quirky old tidbit follows tea from its earlier stories. Some traditions claim people once chewed tea leaves directly. Not because they were chasing elegance, but because chewing was practical. No porcelain, no ceremony, no delicate cup raised with poetic dignity. Just a person on a damp hillside, chewing a bitter leaf for energy. History can be very graceful, but it also has a habit of beginning with someone basically trying to get through the day. You continue along a narrow path between shrubs, and the atmosphere grows cooler. Mist beads on your hair and sleeves. The leaves brush against your palm, slick with moisture. Each one is ordinary up close, pointed, veined, firm, green. Nothing about it shouts empire. Nothing says revolution. Nothing says future ships will cross violent seas for this taste. That is the strange tenderness of beginnings. The world-changing thing usually starts small enough to fit between finger and thumb. Ancient Chinese texts mention bitter plants and medicinal brews, though identifying the exact moment tea appears is not simple. Historians still argue whether the earliest references describe true tea or other bitter herbs used in similar ways. Words shift over centuries. Plants share names. Legends grow over facts like moss over stone. You listen to that uncertainty not as a flaw, but as part of the hush. The past does not always speak clearly. Sometimes it murmurs through fragments. In this early world, tea is tied to health, not leisure. People think in terms of balance, heat, cold, digestion, alertness, and harmony inside the body. A bitter infusion might be valued because bitterness itself is considered active, cleansing, and serious. Nobody is saying, this pairs beautifully with shortbread. Not yet. The leaf has work to do. You sit near a doorway while rain begins to fall, tapping softly on packed earth and wooden roofs. A woman pours hot liquid from a dark pot into bowls that do not match. The steam curls upward and disappears. Outside, the hills vanish behind pale fog. The drink warms your hands. The bowl is rough against your skin, slightly gritty where the clay was shaped and fired. You sip slowly, not because someone told you to be mindful, but because it is hot and because the taste asks for patience. The village around you knows nothing of future tea houses, taxes, treaties, plantations, or trading companies. It knows seasons, it knows hunger and harvest, it knows the healing power of small routines. A leaf gathered at the right time, water brought to heat, a bitter cup shared before labour begins again. This is how tea first enters human life, not as a luxury, but as a relationship between people, plants, weather, and need. The deeper you stay with this scene, the more you feel how tea's power comes from its contradictions. It wakes the mind, yet calms the body. It is simple, yet socially rich. It belongs to nature, yet invites culture. It can be medicine, meal, offering, habit, trade good, or quiet companion. Even at the beginning, it refuses to be only one thing. Very dramatic behaviour for a shrub. Honestly, as evening settles, smoke thickens in the lanes and the scent of boiled greens drifts through the settlement. Children quiet down. Tools are stacked under shelter. The mountains become dark shapes against a fading sky. In a small interior lit by firelight, someone places dried leaves into a vessel and adds water. The sound is gentle, almost private. A pour, a breath, a pause. You hold the bowl again. The warmth spreads into your fingers. Outside, rain threads through the night. Inside, the bitter scent rises with the steam. You do not yet know that centuries will polish this drink into art, that monks will carry it across seas, that merchants will weigh it like treasure, that governments will tax it, and that ordinary people will make it part of their daily peace. For now, it is enough to feel the leaf open in hot water, and in that quiet opening, tea begins. You stand beside a small outdoor hearth, where the morning air is cool enough to make the steam look almost alive. A bronze vessel rests above the flame. Water trembles inside it, sending up tiny silver bubbles that gather and vanish. Around you, the world smells of wet bark, ash, and green leaves bruised by rain. Somewhere beyond the trees, a bird gives one clear note, then seems to think better of performing and falls silent. This is where legend invites you closer. The story says, an ancient ruler named Shen Nong, often called the Divine Farmer, once sat beneath a tree while his servants boiled water. A few leaves drifted down, landed in the pot, and changed the water's colour, curious, or perhaps just very committed to trying suspicious things in the name of science. He tasted it. The drink refreshed him. It cleared his senses. Tea, in this telling, entered history by accident, with a breeze doing the catering. You watch the leaves spin slowly in the hot water. They soften, darken, and release a faint scent, grassy and clean with a hidden bitterness. The cup is placed in your hands. Its warmth presses into your palms. The rim is plain. No decoration, no ceremony, no polished table. Just heat, leaf, water, and the human habit of wondering what happens if you taste something new. Shennong is one of China's great culture heroes, associated with agriculture, herbal medicine, and the testing of plants. The mainstream historical fact is that Chinese tradition links him with teaching people farming and medicinal knowledge. In old stories, he tastes hundreds of herbs to learn which heal and which harm. That image matters. Tea's legendary birth is not about luxury. It is about experiment, risk, and observation. Of course, the tale is wrapped in mist. Historians still debate whether Shen Nong was based on a real ancient leader, a memory of many early agricultural teachers, or a symbolic figure created to explain how farming and medicine began. The answer slips away like steam from the pot. Still, myths often preserve emotional truths even when dates refuse to behave. People did learn by testing plants. They did pass discoveries through stories. They did turn useful leaves into traditions. You follow a narrow path into a clearing where herbs are spread across mats. Some are roots, twisted like sleeping fingers. Some are seeds in shallow bowls. Others are leaves drying in careful layers, their edges curling as moisture leaves them. The air is busy with scent bitter, sweet, peppery, smoky. You hear the soft scratch of a knife chopping stems, the tap of a pestle, the sigh of wind through branches. In this world, boiling water is already important. It makes water safer. It draws strength from plants. It changes raw nature into something the body can accept. When leaves fall into a pot in the legend, the accident works because the culture already understands heat, infusion, and healing. Tea does not appear from nowhere. It steps into habits that are waiting for it. The quirky tidbit hiding in the Shennong tradition is wonderfully strange. Some versions say his body was transparent, so he could watch herbs moving through his organs and see their effects. Very convenient, really. Modern doctors have machines. Shennong apparently had dramatic see-through anatomy and an impossible work ethic. It sounds absurd, but it expresses a serious idea the healer must observe deeply, even inside the hidden places of the body. You sip the infusion. It is sharper than expected. It grips the sides of your tongue, then fades into a clean dryness. Your breathing slows. The warmth moves down your throat. The clearing feels more focused now, as if the leaves have quietly turned up the brightness of the world. The flame snaps. A servant lifts the vessel away from the fire. The water settles. The legend also gives tea a moral personality. It is not wine, which can blur the senses. It is not a heavy food that pulls the body towards sleep. It is clear, bitter, alert. In Chinese thought, bitterness often belongs with discipline and correction. The first cup feels almost like advice. Not soft advice, either. More like a calm elder saying, "Drink this. Stop complaining. Continue." You notice how easily a simple accident becomes destiny. A few leaves fall, a ruler drinks, a people remember, then centuries later, the story is repeated around tables, in books, in tea shops, in lessons for children. Nobody in the clearing announces a world-changing beverage. There is no thunder, no golden light, no official committee, thankfully. Just a pot and a curious mouth. Yet the tale survives because it gives tea a perfect beginning. It joins nature and culture in one quiet moment. The wind contributes the leaves. The human hand has prepared the water. Curiosity completes the act. Tea becomes a meeting place between chance and attention. You remain near the hearth as clouds drift above the trees. The ground is soft under your feet, dark with recent rain. Smoke clings to your sleeves. A bowl is rinsed with hot water and set upside down on a stone. The leaves from the pot are removed and examined, as if they might explain themselves. They do not. Leaves rarely give interviews. They simply offer fragrance, flavour, and the possibility of being remembered. The people around you return to their tasks, but the cup stays in your awareness. It is easy to imagine this moment repeated in countless forms: a healer testing bitterness, a farmer boiling herbs, a traveller chewing a leaf for strength, a family warming themselves while rain falls beyond the doorway. Whether Shen Nong truly sat beneath that exact tree matters less than the pattern the story preserves. Someone noticed. Someone tasted. Someone taught another person. The afternoon grows quiet. Light filters through the branches in pale green patches. You hold the last warmth of the bowl and listen to the fire shrinking into embers. The legend settles around you, not as a hard fact, but as a gentle doorway into tea's earliest meaning. It is curiosity made drinkable. It is medicine with a memory. It is an accident that people chose to repeat, and as the steam thins into the cool air, the leaf becomes more than a leaf. You climb into the mountains where the air grows thinner, cooler, and touched with the scent of pine needles, damp stone, and old incense. The path curves between mossy rocks. Your sandals press into mud softened by mist. Somewhere above, hidden by clouds, a wooden bell sounds once, deep and hollow. Then the silence folds around it again. A monastery waits on the slope, its tiled roofs dark from rain. The buildings seem to lean into the mountain rather than stand apart from it. Smoke rises from a kitchen chimney in a pale ribbon. Prayer flags or cloth streamers move faintly in the breeze. Depending on the region and the century your imagination has gently wandered into, the atmosphere is not dramatic. It is disciplined, quiet, and slightly cold in the fingers. Inside the monastery courtyard, monks move with slow purpose. Robes brush against stone. A broom whispers across wet leaves. Water drips from the edge of a roof into a wooden basin, each drop making a small, patient sound. You smell boiled rice, ash, cedar, and the faint bitterness of leaves being heated somewhere nearby. Tea becomes important in Buddhist life because it helps the body remain awake without pulling the mind into heaviness. That is the mainstream fact at the centre of this mountain world. Monks spend long hours chanting, copying text, bowing, walking, and sitting in meditation. Sleepiness is not a minor inconvenience. It is the enemy that arrives softly, politely, and then steals the entire evening. You enter a hall where mats cover the floor, the air is dim and cool. A line of monks sits facing inward, their breathing steady. Candles tremble, incense curls upward, sweet and dry, almost dusty in your nose. You lower yourself carefully, feeling the woven mat press against your ankles. The stillness is not empty. It is full of tiny sounds, a throat clearing, a sleeve shifting, the faint creak of old wood. After a long session, tea is brought in. The bowls are simple, not showy. The liquid is hot enough to send steam into the dim light. You wrap both hands around your bowl and feel warmth return to your palms. The scent is green, bitter, and alive. When you sip, the taste clears your mouth. Your shoulders loosen. Your attention sharpens, gently but unmistakably, like a lamp wick being raised. In this setting, tea is not merely a drink. It becomes part of spiritual technology, which sounds far too modern for a wooden bowl. But there it is. The body must be managed so the mind can stay present. Too much food dulls you. Too little food distracts you. Cold seeps into the bones. Silence can become sleepy. Tea helps create a middle state awake, calm, restrained. There is a famous and rather odd legend connected to Buddhist wakefulness. In some versions of the story, the monk Bodhidharma grows furious after falling asleep during meditation. To prevent it from happening again, he cuts off his eyelids, and where they fall. Tea plants grow. It is an intense solution to drowsiness, and frankly, not the sort of productivity tip one hopes to see on a modern wellness poster. But the tale captures tea's reputation beautifully. The leaf is linked with open eyes, discipline, and the struggle to remain aware. The historical details are much less theatrical. Tea was used in Chinese monastic communities, and Buddhist monks helped spread its reputation as a drink for clarity and devotion. Religious networks were also travel networks. Monks moved between temples. Texts moved with them. Ritual habits moved too, tucked into sleeves, memory, and daily practice. A useful drink could travel almost as quietly as a prayer. Historians continue to discuss how early and how widely tea was used in particular monasteries. Since surviving evidence is uneven and often filtered through later tradition, some records are clear enough to show tea's growing importance, while other claims rely on legend, temple memory, or text written long after the habits began. The uncertainty does not weaken the scene. It only reminds you that daily life often leaves softer footprints than kings and battles. You follow a monk toward the kitchen. The room is warmer, fragrant with steam, grain, and smoke. Iron pots hang over low fires. Shelves hold bundles of herbs and dried foods. Tea leaves may be boiled, pounded, mixed, or prepared in ways that differ from the loose-leaf cup familiar to many modern drinkers. The drink is practical. It is made in quantity. It belongs to the rhythm of bells, meals, study, and night watches. A young novice stirs a pot with careful seriousness, as if the entire universe depends on not spilling anything. Perhaps, in a monastery, it does. He pours the drink into bowls, and you notice the slight roughness of his hands, reddened from cold water and chores. The bowl he gives you is warm, with a small chip near the rim. You drink slowly. The bitterness no longer feels harsh. It feels honest. Outside, the mountain disappears into cloud. Rain begins as a whisper, touching leaves, roof tiles, and stone steps. The sound creates a soft curtain around the monastery. Inside the hall, monks chant in low voices that rise and fall like breathing earth. Tea rests beside them, humble and steady, not demanding attention, but helping attention remain possible. You begin to understand why a bitter leaf could become beloved among people seeking stillness. Meditation is not always serene. Sometimes the back aches. Sometimes the knees complain like unpaid officials. Sometimes the mind runs around carrying nonsense. Tea does not solve this, but it offers a small kindness. Warmth in the hands, fragrance in the breath, a clear edge in the mind. As night settles, lamps are lit. Their glow touches wooden beams blackened by years of smoke. The monastery quiets into its evening pattern. You sit near an open doorway with your bowl, feeling cool air on your face and heat against your fingers. The mountains are hidden, but you sense their weight around you, immense and patient. The final sip is darker, carrying the taste of leaves that have given nearly everything to the water. You lower the bowl. Somewhere, a bell sounds again. Tea has entered the life of discipline and contemplation, not as luxury, but as a companion for those trying to stay awake in every possible sense. You enter a city where dawn opens slowly over tiled roofs, market awnings, and streets still damp from night mist. The air carries many smells at once: sesame oil warming in pans, horse sweat near the gates, incense from a shrine, and the green, roasted scent of tea being prepared in a household courtyard. Somewhere a vendor calls out in a voice still rough with sleep. Wheels creak, silk brushes against silk. A dog barks as if personally offended by civilization. This is the Tang dynasty, One of the great ages of Chinese culture, trade, poetry, and urban life, Chang'an, the imperial capital, is among the largest and most cosmopolitan cities of its time, drawing officials, monks, merchants, musicians, and envoys from distant lands. You feel that richness under your feet as you walk along broad avenues laid out with imperial order, past walls and gates that seem to make even ordinary errands feel slightly official. Tea has changed here. It is no longer only a medicinal brew or a monastic helper against sleep. It is becoming culture. It is discussed, judged, purchased, prepared with skill, and praised in writing. People care where leaves come from. They care how they are processed. They care how water is heated. They care whether the final bowl tastes elegant or unpleasantly like something scraped from a wet basket. Humans, given enough time, can become sophisticated about almost anything. You step into a modest tea house where the light is soft and the floor has been swept clean. A charcoal brazier glows red. A kettle breathes steam. The room smells of roasted leaf, dry wood, clay, and faint perfume from someone's sleeve. Bowls sit in a row, each with a pale interior that will show the colour of the drink. You hear low conversation, the scrape of a bench, the careful clink of utensils. Tang tea is often prepared from compressed cakes. Fresh leaves are steamed, pounded, shaped into cakes, dried, and stored. When needed, a portion is broken off, roasted over heat, ground into powder, and boiled with water. Sometimes salt is added. Yes, salt. Your modern tongue may quietly object, but the past is not running a cafe designed for your approval. The resulting drink can be thick, savoury, and stimulating, closer to a nourishing broth than a delicate afternoon cup. You watch as a host warms a cake of tea near the fire. The surface darkens slightly, releasing a toasty fragrance that mixes with the charcoal smoke. The cake is then crushed and ground. The sound is dry and rhythmic, stone against leaf, patience turning into powder. Water begins to boil in stages, first with tiny bubbles like fish eyes, then with pearls rising, then with rolling energy that makes the kettle seem impatient. A man beside you speaks of water sources with the seriousness of a court minister discussing border defence. Spring water from the mountains is praised. River water may be acceptable if taken carefully. Well, water is often judged more suspiciously. In refined tea culture, water is not a background ingredient. It is half the art. You look into your bowl and realise this entire civilization is teaching you to notice what you once ignored. The great mainstream fact of Tang tea culture is the appearance of Lu Yu's Classic of Tea. Written in the 8th century, Lu Yu, later honoured almost like a patron saint of tea, described tea's origins, tools, preparation, and ideals with remarkable attention. His work helped elevate tea from habit to cultivated practice. You can almost feel his influence in the room, the preference for proper utensils, good leaves, careful water, and a spirit of quiet discernment. Lu Yu's own life contains a charmingly unusual detail. Tradition says he was found as an abandoned child and raised in a Buddhist monastery, where he developed both learning and a deep familiarity with tea. Later stories make him wonderfully tea-obsessed, the sort of person who might silently judge your kettle from across a room. Whether every anecdote is reliable is another matter, but the image endures a scholar of leaves, water, heat, and taste. Historians continue to question how widely Lu Yu's refined standards shaped everyday tea drinking beyond educated circles. Elite texts often preserve the habits of people with leisure, literacy, and access to good materials. A farmer, a porter, or a busy cook may not have paused to debate the spiritual character of mountain water. Still, the text reveals that by the Tang period, tea had become something worth thinking about deeply, and that alone is a major transformation. Your host now pours the prepared tea. The liquid is cloudy from the powdered leaf, warm in colour, and fragrant with roasted bitterness. You lift the bowl. Its ceramic surface is smooth in places and slightly uneven in others. The heat reaches your fingertips. You sip. The taste is bold, salty, vegetal, smoky, and oddly comforting. It settles in the mouth like food and medicine having a quiet meeting. Outside, the city grows louder, hooves strike stone. Officials pass in robes. Students hurry with books and very serious expressions, as students have apparently always done. Merchants unload goods from distant regions, and among those goods are teas from celebrated producing areas. Tribute teas travel toward the court. Fine teas circulate as gifts. Tea begins to carry meaning beyond flavour respect, refinement, connection, status. You enter a scholar's room later in the day. Scrolls lie open on a desk. A brush rests beside an inkstone. A window frames bamboo shifting in the breeze. Tea is prepared not for thirst alone, but for conversation, poetry, and attention. The sound of grinding leaf becomes part of the room's music. The fragrance gathers around the scrolls. A guest composes a line about mist on distant hills, which is lovely, though possibly improved by the caffeine. In Tang culture, tea fits beautifully with the arts of withdrawal and sociability. It can accompany solitude in a mountain hut, yet also strengthen bonds among friends. It suits monks, officials, poets, travellers, and hosts. It is humble enough to be daily, refined enough to be symbolic. That flexibility is one reason it travels so well through society. Evening settles over the city. Lanterns glow behind paper windows. The air cools, and the smell of tea lingers in courtyards where conversations soften. You sit with one final bowl, listening to rain begin again on the roof tiles. The drink is warm, dark, and steady. In this age, tea has found language, tools, etiquette, and memory. It has become an art without ceasing to be a comfort. You stand at the edge of a harbour where the sea breathes against wooden piers, lifting and lowering moored boats with a slow, sleepy rhythm. The air smells of salt, rope fibre, fish, damp planks, and smoke from cooking fires along the shore. Gulls cry overhead with the confidence of creatures who have never paid rent. Men in travel robes speak quietly beside bundles of goods, while sailors check knots and watch the sky. Across the water lies Japan, not as an empty destination waiting politely for a drink, but as a country with its own courtly tastes, religious life, farming worlds, and political struggles. Tea travels there through contact, devotion, and curiosity. It moves with monks, envoys, merchants, texts, seeds, and habits. Nothing about that journey is instant. Culture rarely walks into a new land and unpacks itself neatly. It settles, pauses, changes clothes, and learns the room. You board a vessel in your imagination, feeling the deck shift beneath your feet. The wood is rough and damp under your hand. Wind fills the sail with a low snap. As the shore recedes, the waves darken, and spray touches your face with a cold sting. Somewhere below, packed among scrolls, robes, bowls, medicines, and supplies. Tea waits in compressed form, quiet and unimpressed by the drama of maritime travel. Buddhist monks were central to tea's movement into Japan. The mainstream historical fact is that Japanese monks and envoys encountered tea in China and brought back both knowledge and seeds over time. Tea appears in early Japanese court and temple contexts, especially during the Heian and Kamakura periods, though its importance grew unevenly. At first, it did not conquer every household. It lived mainly among religious and elite circles, like a guest who's been invited to the best room but not yet to the kitchen. You arrive near a temple where cedar trees rise tall and straight, their bark dark with rain. The ground is carpeted with needles, soft underfoot. A bell sounds from within the complex, not loud, but deep enough to settle in your chest. Incense floats from a hall, mingling with the clean scent of wet wood. a monk moves along a covered walkway, his robe brushing the boards with a whisper. Tea here is valued for wakefulness, health, and discipline. In temple life, the drink supports meditation and study, yet it also takes on new textures from Japanese surroundings. Gardens, seasonal awareness, silence, architecture, and local ideas of restraint begin to shape the way tea is received. You're not watching a simple copy, you're watching translation. In a small room, a monk prepares powdered tea. The utensils are modest. A bowl rests on a mat. Water is heated, and the faint sound of bubbling fills the room. Powdered tea is placed into the bowl, and hot water follows. A whisk moves quickly, making a soft, rushing sound, like wind crossing dry grass. Foam gathers on the surface. You lean closer and smell something vivid green, fresh, slightly roasted, with a bitterness that wakes the mouth before you even sip. A famous figure in this story is Aisai, the Japanese monk who returned from China in the late 12th century and promoted tea in Japan. He's associated with Zen Buddhism and wrote about tea's health benefits. His work helped give tea religious and medicinal authority. You can imagine him presenting tea not as a frivolous pleasure, but as a serious support for the body and mind, which is exactly how one persuades people who are suspicious of new habits. There is a quirky tidbit attached to Isai's reputation. One tale says he offered tea to the shogun Minamoto no Sanetomo as a remedy after a night of heavy drinking. The shogun, apparently suffering in the universal human tradition of regretting yesterday, received tea as medicine. Whether the scene happened exactly as told is uncertain, but it captures an important point. Tea could be praised as a cure, a stimulant, and a respectable alternative to more troublesome pleasures. Scholars still debate how quickly tea spread in Japan outside temples and warrior elites. Some evidence points to early aristocratic interest, while broader cultivation and popular use developed gradually across regions and centuries. Surviving sources often favour powerful institutions, so the everyday pace of adoption is difficult to trace. The cup in your hands feels clear enough, but the social map around it remains partly veiled. You walk from the temple toward young tea plants growing near a slope. The soil is dark and damp, leaves shine after rain, each one holding tiny beads of water. The air is cool, with a faint sweetness from nearby grasses and a mineral smell rising from stone paths. A monk bends to inspect the plants, touching them gently, as if greeting something foreign that may become familiar. Tea cultivation in Japan is often linked with temple grounds and carefully chosen landscapes. The plants need attention, shade in some methods, pruning, plucking, and processing. Each step requires hands, weather, and memory. You hear the small sounds of labour baskets shifting against hips, leaves being sorted, sandals scuffing wet earth. This is not only a spiritual story, it is agricultural work, slow and repetitive, with mud involved. Enlightenment may be noble, but somebody still has to weed. As tea enters warrior households, its mood changes again. The samurai class becomes interested not only in tea's alerting quality, but also in its social uses. Gatherings can display refinement, alliances, competition, and taste. Fine imported Chinese objects become prized. Bowls, jars, paintings, and utensils carry prestige. Tea begins to sit near power, not as a weapon, but as a quieter performance of rank and control. You find yourself in a residence where polished wooden floors reflect lamplight. Outside, a garden pond darkens under evening clouds. Inside, guests examine objects with careful attention. A tea jar is admired. A bowl is turned slightly in the hands. The atmosphere is formal, yet alive with subtle judgments. Nobody needs to shout. In elite culture, a raised eyebrow can do the work of a trumpet. The drink itself remains grounding. When the bowl reaches you, it is warm and heavy. The surface of the tea is bright green, flecked with foam. You taste bitterness first, then a rounded sweetness beneath it, like grass after rain. The texture is thicker than steeped tea, soft against the tongue, It wakes you without jolting you. The room seems to quiet around the sip. Over time, Japanese tea culture will develop its own deep aesthetic language. But here you stay with the earlier rooting temple discipline, medicinal praise, elite curiosity, imported styles, and local transformation. A drink carried over water begins to grow in new soil. It does not lose its past, but it stops being only foreign. The cedar shade, the damp garden, the temple bell, the warrior hall, the green foam in a dark bowl, all these make it Japanese in feeling as well as practice. Night settles over the compound. Rain taps softly on roof tiles. The sea that carried monks and leaves is now only a distant sound in memory, replaced by the hush of trees and the breath of heated water. You lower the bowl, feeling its warmth fade slowly from your palms. In this quiet land of temples, gardens, and disciplined rooms, tea has crossed the water and found another way to belong. You step into a courtyard where the morning light falls as pale gold across polished stone. Clipped shrubs and lacquered railings still cool from the night. A servant slides open a door, and the room inside breathes out the scent of warmed wood, clean water, faint incense, and powdered tea. The air feels refined, but not stiff. It is the kind of refinement that pretends to be effortless while quietly requiring everyone to know 30 invisible rules. This is the Song dynasty, a world where tea becomes lighter, brighter, and more competitive. Cities grow large and lively. Printing spreads books more widely. Markets hum with trade. Scholars, officials, artists, monks, merchants, and skilled artisans shape a culture that loves elegance, examination, and subtle display. Tea fits beautifully into this environment because it can be both simple and extremely complicated, depending on how much time and social pressure people are willing to pour into it. You enter a reception room where low tables are arranged with bowls, jars, cloths, brushes, and a small stove. Sunlight touches a black glazed tea bowl, making its surface gleam like still water at night. The bowl is heavier than it looks. When you lift it, the ceramic feels cool, dense, and smooth beneath your fingers. Nearby, water begins to heat, giving off a soft murmur. The sound is delicate, almost secretive. In the Song period, powdered tea remains important, but preparation becomes increasingly associated with whisking and creating a fine foam. The mainstream historical fact is that tea competitions became fashionable, especially among elites and connoisseurs. Participants judged the colour of the tea, the quality and persistence of the froth, and sometimes the marks left inside the bowl. Imagine a quiet room full of serious adults staring at foam as if the fate of civilization depends on it. Honestly, human culture is magnificent. The host takes powdered tea and places it carefully into the bowl. Hot water is added in measured amounts. A whisk begins to move with quick, controlled energy. The sound is soft and rapid, like rain tapping bamboo leaves. Pale foam rises across the surface, creamy and delicate. You lean closer and smell a fresh bitterness, cleaner than smoke, greener than grain, with a faint roasted depth underneath. The foam matters. It shows skill. It reveals timing, water temperature, quality of powder, and the steadiness of the hand. A good bowl of Song tea is not merely consumed. It is observed. The colour should be clear and lively. The surface should hold its froth. The black bowls made in places such as Jian ware kilns are prized partly because their dark glaze makes the pale tea foam stand out dramatically. Beauty, in this case, is contrast. You take a sip. The liquid is smooth, airy, and bright. The bitterness arrives first, then a mellow sweetness spreads gently at the back of the mouth. The texture is different from a boiled drink. It feels lifted, almost cloud-like. Warmth gathers in your chest while the scent lingers in your nose. Outside, A breeze passes through bamboo, and the leaves answer in a dry whisper. Tea in this setting becomes linked with scholarly life. Officials and literati use it during writing, painting, discussion, and retreat from public duties. A brush rests beside an inkstone. A scroll lies open, showing a few spare branches painted in black ink. The room is quiet, but it is not sleepy. It is charged with attention. Tea sharpens that attention without making it loud. A quirky song tea fashion appears in the art called dianchar, or whisked tea preparation, and in the playful practice of making patterns on the tea surface. Some accounts describe designs formed in foam, including shapes like flowers, animals, or written characters. For a few floating moments, the surface of the bowl becomes a tiny stage, then the image dissolves, which is perhaps the most Song Dynasty thing imaginable, exquisite beauty that vanishes before anyone can get too comfortable. The imperial court also takes tea seriously. Emperor Huizong, famous for his artistic tastes and disastrous political fortune, wrote about tea and appreciated refined preparation. His interest helped confirm tea's status as an art of elite cultivation. You can picture a courtly environment where the correct bowl, the correct powder, the correct water, and the correct motion of the wrist all carry meaning. It is peaceful on the surface, but beneath it runs competition, hierarchy, and the terrifying possibility of being thought tasteless. Historians still disagree about how far these refined tea practices reached beyond elite and urban circles. Written sources often come from educated men, court circles, or later collectors, while ordinary drinkers leave fewer records. Some people surely enjoyed tea in simpler ways, without debating foam thickness or glaze colour. The dazzling culture of connoisseurs is real, but it is not the whole of society. The past, as usual, refuses to fit neatly in one bowl. You walk toward a market street where the formal room gives way to bustle. Tea sellers call to customers. Steam rises from stalls. The smell changes from delicate incense to hot oil, wet straw, cooked noodles, and roasted leaves. Bowls clatter, coins click. Porters shout good-natured complaints. Here tea belongs not only to scholars, but also to busy urban life. It warms hands, clears throats, encourages talk, and gives people an excuse to pause. A tea stall owner prepares a quicker drink, less elegant but deeply welcome. The counter is worn smooth by elbows. The bowl he gives you is chipped at the foot. Its warmth is immediate. You sip while standing near the street, feeling damp air move through your sleeves. The flavour is rougher than the courtly bowl, but it carries its own comfort. Perfection is pleasant. Convenience, however, has always had a strong fan base. As the day deepens, you sense how song tea culture holds two truths together. It can be refined into art, measured by foam, colour, vessel, and technique. It can also be part of the ordinary city, poured quickly for people with errands, gossip, and tired feet. The same leaf can support a scholar's poem and a vendor's income. It can sit beneath a painted screen or beside a muddy street. Tea remains wonderfully adaptable, which is probably why it keeps surviving human attempts to make it exclusive. In the evening, you return to the quiet room, lamps glow softly. The black bowl rests on the table, empty now except for a faint pale trace along the inner wall. Your fingers remember its weight. Your mouth remembers the light bitterness and airy foam. Outside, the bamboo moves in the dark, making a sound like distant rain. Song tea is elegance in motion. Powder meets water, wrist meets whisk. Foam rises, shines, and fades. For a moment, the cup contains discipline, pleasure, status, skill, and silence, all trembling on the surface before dissolving into warmth. You leave the polished rooms and crowded markets for a road that is barely a road at all. It climbs through high country where the wind has teeth, where stones shift underfoot, and where the sky feels too wide to belong to anyone. The air is thin and dry. It carries the smell of horse sweat, cold dust, leather, and smoke from a distant campfire. Bells tied to pack animals clink softly as a caravan moves across the slope. Tea travels here in a different body, not loose in delicate jars, not powdered for elegant bowls, but pressed into hard bricks and cakes that can survive distance, weather, and rough handling. You hold one in your hands. It is dense, dark, and faintly aromatic, with a surface marked by pressure and age. It feels more like a small roof tile than a drink. Practical, sturdy, not especially interested in being admired. Perfect for the frontier, really. Across Western China, Tibet, and Central Asia, tea becomes part of a long-distance exchange. The mainstream historical fact is that compressed tea moved along caravan routes, especially through the trade often called the Tea Horse Road, linking tea-producing regions with Tibetan areas where horses, livestock products, and other goods were exchanged. Tea was valuable because it was portable, durable, and useful in places where fresh vegetables could be scarce. You walk beside muleteers and horse handlers as the track narrows between cliffs. A river roars below, white and furious over rocks. The sound fills the gorge until conversation becomes a matter of leaning close. Your cloak snaps in the wind. Dust settles on your lips. Every step reminds you that trade is not an abstract diagram in a book. It is aching knees, tired animals, wet socks, broken wheels, bad weather, and someone muttering creatively under their breath. At a resting place. The caravan stops near a cluster of low buildings with smoke slipping from roof holes. A woman takes a brick of tea and chips pieces from it with a knife. The dry leaves break with a rough crackle. They're added to a pot with water, then boiled until the liquid darkens. In Tibetan communities, tea is often prepared with butter, salt, and sometimes milk, creating a rich drink that nourishes as much as refreshes. You sit inside a room warmed by a dung fire. The smoke is sharp and earthy, clinging to your hair and sleeves. The walls are darkened from years of heat. Outside, wind combs across the plateau. Inside, a wooden churn works with a steady plunging sound. Tea, butter, and salt are beaten together until the drink becomes thick and glossy. When the cup reaches you, it is warm enough to soften your stiff fingers. The first sip surprises you. It is salty, fatty, smoky, and deeply comforting. The butter coats your mouth. The tea gives bitterness and structure. The salt wakes the tongue. It is not the tea of quiet scholars or courtly foam. It is a drink for altitude, cold, and labour. It offers calories, warmth, and a sense that your bones might forgive you for bringing them to such a windy place. A quirky tidbit about tea bricks is that in some regions they served not only as a drink ingredient, but also as a form of exchange. Tea could be valuable enough to function almost like money in certain trade settings. A brick might buy goods, settle obligations, or move wealth across difficult terrain. Imagine paying someone with a future beverage. Honestly, it sounds strange until you remember that modern people regularly trust tiny pieces of plastic and glowing numbers on screens. The caravan continues across passes where prayer flags snap in the wind and snow lingers in shaded hollows. Animals breathe hard. Their flanks steam in the cold. You hear the creak of saddle frames, the grunt of men lifting loads, the brittle crunch of frost under boots at dawn. At night, the stars burn fiercely above the camp, and the teapot becomes a small centre of gravity. People gather near it because heat and conversation are both forms of shelter. Historians still argue about the exact scale, timing, and organisation of the Tea Horse Road across different periods. Some routes were official, some commercial, some seasonal, and some controlled by local powers whose records are fragmentary. The phrase itself can make the system sound more unified than it always was. In reality, you're moving through a web of paths, bargains, taxes, dangers, and relationships that change with dynasties, climates, warfare, and demand. You notice that tea on these routes is not merely a Chinese export meeting passive consumers. Tibetan, Central Asian, and borderland communities shape tea according to their own needs and tastes. They add butter, salt, milk, grains, or spices. They value the drink in relation to diet, climate, hospitality, and social life. A cup offered in a tent or house becomes a gesture of welcome. Refusing it would feel rude, and also foolish, because the wind outside is not serving refreshments. In one settlement, a trader unwraps bundles beneath a felt awning. Tea bricks lie beside wool, hides, medicinal roots, salt, and metal tools. The market smells of animals, smoke, fermented dairy, and cold earth. Voices rise in several languages. Hands test the weight of goods. A man taps a tea brick, listening to its firmness. Another examines its colour. Quality matters, even in rugged places. Especially in rugged places, perhaps, because bad tea at high altitude feels like a personal betrayal. You pause near a group of travellers sharing cups from a blackened pot. Their faces are reddened by wind. Their boots are patched. Their laughter is low and tired. Steam rises between them, briefly softening the hard lines of the landscape. The drink links producer and herder, monastery and market, lowland forest and high plateau. It carries plant warmth into places where few green things grow, as evening spreads violet over the mountains. You hold one last cup of butter tea. The vessel is smooth from use, warm against your palms, slightly greasy at the rim. Outside, bells clink as animals settle. Somewhere a child coughs, then laughs. The fire throws orange light against the wall. The tea tastes of salt, smoke, distance, and survival. Here, tea becomes roadworthy. It learns the language of caravans, hooves, passes, bargaining, hunger, hospitality, and cold. Pressed into bricks, packed onto animals, chipped into pots, and shared beneath enormous skies, the leaf becomes more than a cultivated taste. It becomes companion for movement through difficult worlds, a small dark weight carrying warmth across the mountains. You enter a world of thunderous hooves, shifting courts, and changing tastes, where the old tea habits do not disappear all at once, but begin to loosen like knots in damp rope. The air smells of trampled grass, leather, smoke, and rain on packed earth. Tents stand beside palace walls in your imagination, because power now moves between steppe and city, between mounted command and cultivated ritual. The horizon feels open, restless, and slightly suspicious of delicate table manners. The Mongol age brings China under the Yuan dynasty, ruled by conquerors whose empire stretches across much of Eurasia. The mainstream historical fact is that Mongol rule connected China more tightly with vast overland networks, linking people, goods, technologies, and tastes across immense distances. Tea remains important, but it now lives in a world where cultural habits meet, compete, and blend under a ruling elite with roots far beyond the old Chinese heartlands. You find yourself near a roadside camp where a fire burns low beneath an iron pot. The wind pushes smoke sideways. Horses stamp and snort in the dark, their bodies warm and musky. A servant breaks compressed tea into the pot, then adds milk or other rich ingredients suited to northern and steppe preferences. The drink that emerges is strong and nourishing and practical. It does not care whether a scholar approves. It has a job. You accept a bowl. The rim is hot against your lip. The flavour is dark, salty, and full, more meal than perfume. Around you, riders speak in low voices. Harness bells shift when animals move. Felt, wool, and leather absorb the cold. The cup warms your hands quickly, and you understand why different landscapes ask different things from tea. A misty southern hill might invite subtle fragrance. A cold camp under a hard sky asks for strength. In elite Chinese circles, older powdered tea traditions continue for some time, but the cultural mood is changing. Under the Yuan and into the Ming, tea begins moving towards simpler steeping of whole or broken leaves. This shift becomes especially important in the Ming Dynasty, when loose-leaf tea rises to dominance. Instead of steaming leaves into cakes, grinding them, and whisking or boiling powder, more drinkers begin steeping processed leaves directly in hot water. The transformation sounds small, almost too domestic to be revolutionary. But you stand beside a table and watch how much it changes. There is no heavy cake to roast, no grinding stone, no powder cloud, no elaborate foam judged with terrifying seriousness. Leaves are placed in a vessel, water is poured over them, and time does the quiet work. The scent rises more clearly floral, grassy, roasted, sweet, or mineral, depending on the leaf. A major turning point comes in the late 14th century, when the first Ming emperor, Hongwu, bans the production of compressed tribute tea cakes for the court and requires loose-leaf tea instead. That decision helps push elite taste away from cake tea and toward loose leaves. You can imagine officials across producing regions receiving the order and quietly realizing that centuries of habit have just been handed a new assignment. Bureaucracy, once again, enters the kitchen. You walk into a Ming household where a small clay pot sits near a brazier. The room smells of dry leaves, warm ceramic, clean water, and faint sandalwood from a chest. The host measures loose tea with practiced fingers. The leaves are wiry and twisted, dark green with hints of brown. They rustle softly as they fall into the pot. Hot water follows, and the fragrance blooms almost immediately, brighter and more distinct than powdered preparations. The cup poured for you is clear, amber green, and light on the tongue. You taste the leaf more directly now. There is sweetness beneath bitterness, and a lingering dryness that makes you want another sip. The texture is thinner than whisked tea, but the aroma feels more open. It is as if tea has stopped wearing a heavy ceremonial robe and changed into something easier to move in. A quirky tidbit from this period is the rising importance of teapots, especially small unglazed clay pots from places such as Yixing. Their porous clay could absorb traces of tea over time, leading some devoted drinkers to claim that a well-seasoned pot improved the flavour. In the most enthusiastic stories, an old pot might be so infused with tea memory that hot water alone could produce a ghost of taste. A charming idea, and also an excellent excuse never to wash something too aggressively. The change to loose-leaf brewing encourages new attention to leaf shape, aroma, oxidation, roasting, and infusion time. Different styles begin to shine in different ways. Green teas can show freshness. Darker processed teas can offer warmth and depth. The cup becomes clearer visually and literally. Instead of admiring foam on the surface, you watch leaves unfurl in water, each one slowly opening like a small green hand. Historians still debate how quickly loose-leaf tea replaced older cake and powdered forms across different social groups and regions. Imperial policy mattered, but daily practice changes unevenly. Some communities held on to older methods. Some adapted quickly because loose-leaf preparation was simpler. Others shifted because markets, tools, and taste all began pointing in the same direction. The past rarely turns a page all at once. It folds corners, loses bookmarks, and carries on. In a market, you see this change becoming commercial life. Tea sellers display baskets of loose leaves, inviting customers to smell and compare them. A buyer lifts a handful and lets it fall back with a papery whisper. Another studies colour and twist. The air is rich with overlapping fragrances: toasted chestnut, fresh grass, dried flowers, smoke, wet clay, and human impatience. The city around you clatters with carts, vendors, and the slap of sandals on stone. The tools change too. Smaller pots, lidded cups, storage jars, kettles, and cups become part of a new brewing world. Porcelain and stoneware offer pale surfaces that reveal the liquor's colour. Unglazed clay holds heat and personality. Preparation becomes less about transforming tea into foam and more about coaxing flavour from leaf to water. It is a gentler drama, but a deep one. You sit near a window while rain taps against the shutters. The host pours a second infusion from the same leaves. It tastes different from the first, softer, rounder, less sharp, with a sweetness that seems to arrive late. This is another gift of loose-leaf brewing. The same leaves can change across multiple steepings. Time becomes layered. A cup is not a single event, but a conversation. Outside, the political world remains unstable, ambitious, and frequently exhausting. Dynasties rise by force, rule by paperwork, worry about borders, tax farmers, reward officials, punish enemies, and commission very large buildings because apparently rulers cannot help themselves. Yet inside this modest room, the shift in tea feels intimate. A hand lifts a pot. Water meets leaves. Fragrance opens. The empire may rumble, but the cup asks you to notice warmth. By night, the room glows with lamplight. The spent leaves rest in the pot, softened and spread wide, their colour deepened by water. You touch the clay vessel and feel it still warm. The old world of compressed cakes, powdered bowls, and foamed surfaces has not vanished completely. But a new habit has taken root. Loose leaves offer clarity, flexibility, and a quieter kind of refinement. Tea has changed its form without losing its soul. It has travelled through conquest, policy, market desire, and household practice. In the clear amber cup before you, you taste a turning point, the leaf no longer hidden inside a cake, no longer ground into powder, but opening slowly in plain hot water, giving itself away one infusion at a time. You stand on a dock where the air is thick with tar, salt, wet rope, and the anxious smell of ships that have crossed too much ocean. Wooden hulls creak beside the pier. Sailors shout in several languages. Barrels roll over planks with dull thuds. Somewhere nearby, spices spill from a torn sack, filling the morning with pepper, cloves, cinnamon, and a sweetness that clings to the throat. Europe is beginning to notice tea. At first, the leaves arrive as a curiosity. One more strange treasure from Asia carried by merchants who are learning, slowly and profitably. The distant tastes can become domestic cravings. Portuguese traders and missionaries encounter tea through contact with China and Japan. Dutch merchants later helped bring it into northern European trade. The mainstream historical fact is that tea entered Europe through maritime trade networks in the 16th and 17th centuries, first as a rare and expensive imported product. You walk past crates marked with symbols, names, and hurried chalk strokes. Some hold porcelain, some hold silk, some hold spices. A smaller chest contains tea, wrapped carefully against dampness, because sea air is rude to nearly everything. When the lid is lifted, the smell is faint, but arresting dry leaves, hay, smoke, and something green hidden under age. A merchant leans in and inhales with the expression of a man trying to decide whether he has found medicine, luxury, or a very overpriced shrub. Europe does not instantly fall in love. The first reactions are mixed, puzzled, and often filtered through medical thinking. People ask what tea does to the body. Does it warm or cool? Does it dry the humours? Is it good for the stomach? Is it dangerous if taken too often? The early modern world loves classifying substances by health effects, sometimes with impressive confidence and questionable evidence. Tea enters as a medicinal novelty before it becomes a daily pleasure. You step into a merchant's room in Amsterdam, where tall windows let in grey northern light. The city outside smells of canals, damp brick, fish markets, and smoke. Inside, the room smells of paper, wax, wool coats, and newly opened goods from Asia. A small quantity of tea is measured out like something precious. Nobody is scooping casually. Every pinch matters. The leaves are placed into hot water, and several men watch as if expecting the cup to confess its secrets. The taste surprises them. It is bitter, thin, fragrant, and unfamiliar. Some approve immediately. Others pretend to understand it because expensive things are embarrassing to dislike. You take the cup and feel the heat through delicate porcelain. Another imported wonder that will become inseparable from tea in European imagination. The liquid is pale. The aroma is subtle, compared with ale, wine, or spiced drinks. It seems almost ghostly, yet the clarity is part of its charm. A quirky tidbit from tea's European arrival is the confusion over names and preparation. Some early Europeans encountered words related to tea through different Chinese dialects and trade routes, which helped to produce different forms such as tea, the, and cha across languages. Even the name carried a map of contact. A word could travel by sea or land, changing sound as it crossed mouths. Language, like tea, steeps in its surroundings. The Dutch East India Company became an important carrier of tea into Europe during the 17th century. Dutch merchants helped establish tea as a fashionable luxury in the Netherlands before it spread more widely. You can imagine elite households serving it with the careful excitement usually reserved for rare objects. A host brings out the tea, guests lean closer. Someone asks how long it should brew. Someone else answers too confidently. Thus begins a tradition that will never truly end. Tea also enters through Portugal's contact with Asia. Portuguese traders had reached Chinese waters earlier, and missionaries wrote about tea and Asian customs. In Lisbon, the drink appears among people connected to overseas trade and courtly curiosity. You walk through a room where tiles shine on the walls and light falls over carved furniture. The cup is small. The serving is cautious. The conversation circles around the drink's supposed virtues. Is it healthful? Is it elegant? Is it worth the price? The last question is, naturally, the most spiritual one. Historians still debate the exact pathways by which tea first became known in different European courts and cities. Because references are scattered, spellings vary, and early trade records do not always distinguish clearly between small medicinal samples, private gifts, and commercial shipments. The broad pattern is clear, but the first cups are harder to pin down. Tea slips into Europe through many doors at once, wearing different labels. You enter a London coffee house later in the century, though the word coffee house does not mean coffee alone. These establishments sell news, arguments, printed notices, tobacco smoke, and drinks that make people talk faster. The air is crowded with pipe smoke, damp wool, ink, and roasted beans. Cups clatter. Men debate trade, war, religion, and other subjects that guarantee nobody will sleep soon. Tea appears on menus as an exotic option, costly and fashionable. At first, tea is far more expensive than ordinary drinks. Taxes, transport, rarity, and fashion all add to the price. It belongs to the well-connected and the curious. Apothecaries and merchants praise it. Advertisements describe its benefits with cheerful certainty. Some writers claim it aids digestion, clears the head, or preserves health. Others worry that foreign habits may weaken bodies or morals, because every new beverage apparently has to survive a period of moral panic. You hold a small cup in the smoky room. Its warmth is pleasant against the damp English chill. The flavour feels clean after the heavy smell of tobacco and ale. Perhaps that is part of tea's appeal. It makes a space inside the noise. It is stimulating, but not intoxicating. It invites conversation without staggering into it. It carries the prestige of distant China, Japan, ships, porcelain, silk, merchants, maps. To drink it is to sip the wider world. Women in elite households also become important to tea's rise. Private domestic service gives tea a different atmosphere from public coffee houses. In parlours, drawing rooms, and bed chambers, tea can be refined, sociable, and controlled by the hostess. It creates a ritual of invitation. A cup is poured, a visitor is welcomed. The room smells of polished wood, perfume, warmed porcelain, and faintly bitter leaves. The social power may be soft, but soft does not mean weak. As evening falls over the harbour, ships rock gently in the tide. Chests are carried into warehouses. Merchants close ledgers by candlelight, calculating profit in ink. Tea remains rare, expensive, and slightly mysterious. But the first curiosity has taken hold. Europe has smelled the leaves, tasted the bitterness, and begun to imagine uses for this quiet Asian drink. The cup in your hands is small, but its world is widening. In the steam, you sense sea routes, trading companies, medical debates, fashionable rooms, and nervous first sips. Tea has crossed oceans not as an empire yet, but as a question Europe cannot stop asking. You step into London on a damp afternoon when the sky hangs low over rooftops and the streets shine with the recent rain. Hooves slap through mud, cartwheels grind in ruts, smoke pours from chimneys and settles between buildings, mixing with the smells of coal, wet wool, river water, bread ovens, and humanity bravely refusing to bathe as often as one might hope. The city is alive, crowded, noisy, and hungry for novelty. Tea is moving from rare curiosity into fashionable habit. You enter a house where the front door closes against the street's clamour, and the indoor air feels warmer, softer, and scented with beeswax. Fire smoke, polished wood, and something faintly green from a small locked tea chest. The chest matters. Tea is costly enough to be kept secure, often with a key held by the lady of the house. Imagine needing household security for dried leaves. And yet, here you are, watching empire's future sit quietly in a little box. The mainstream historical fact is that tea gained major social importance in England after the Portuguese princess Catherine of Braganza married King Charles II in 1662. She was already familiar with tea, and her presence at court helped make the drink fashionable among the English elite. Royal preference did not create tea from nothing, but it gave the habit sparkle, permission, and that dangerous shine of aristocratic approval. You stand in a chamber where curtains dim the grey daylight, a fire crackles behind a grate, the floorboards creak beneath careful footsteps. Porcelain cups wait on a tray, their thin walls painted with blue designs that suggest distant landscapes. A kettle hisses nearby, and when the water is poured, the leaves release a quiet fragrance that seems almost too delicate for such a smoky city. The hostess opens the tea chest and measures the leaves with care. Her fingers move gracefully, but there is calculation beneath the grace. This is hospitality, yes, but also display. Fine tea says the household has access, taste, and money. It says the hostess knows the new fashion. It says the family is close enough to global trade to bring Asia into the sitting room without getting mud on the carpet. Very efficient social climbing. Really? You sit near the fire, feeling heat on one side of your face and cool air at your back. A cup is placed in your hand. The porcelain feels smooth, almost fragile, and the liquid within glows amber brown. You smell tannin, dry leaf, and a faint roasted note. The first sip is brisk and slightly bitter. Sugar may be offered. Sometimes milk, though practices vary. Each edition changes the drink and the social meaning around it. Tea's arrival in the English home gives women a particular role in its spread. Coffee houses are mostly male spaces of politics, news, and commercial talk, while tea tables become strongly associated with domestic sociability. Women host, pour, serve, and manage the ritual. That does not make the tea table trivial. It becomes a place where conversation, reputation, family alliance, gossip, manners, and consumer desire circulate with impressive force. You hear the room's small orchestra teaspoons tapping porcelain, silk skirts whispering over chairs, firewood cracking, rain ticking on window glass, a low laugh hidden behind a fan. A visitor comments on the tea's quality. Another notices the cups. Someone says the weather is dreadful, because some social customs are apparently eternal. The hostess pours again, controlling the rhythm of the gathering one cup at a time. A quirky tidbit from early English tea culture is the rise of specialised tea furniture and accessories tea tables, caddies, tongs for sugar, slop bowls for discarded liquid, and delicate cups without handles. A whole landscape of objects gathered around the leaf. Tea did not simply enter the home, it redecorated. One almost expects the leaves to request matching curtains. Tea also became tied to politeness. The ritual required measured behaviour, not drinking too loudly, not mishandling porcelain, not appearing greedy with sugar, not showing ignorance of the proper sequence. These rules could be comforting or oppressive, depending on your position in the room. A cup of tea might warm your hands, but it could also test your manners. Historians still argue about how quickly tea spread from elite households into the broader middle classes. Prices, taxes, smuggling, imitation, and changing retail networks all played a part. The wealthy adopted tea first in visible ways, but shopkeepers, tradespeople, and urban families gradually joined the habit as availability increased. The social descent of tea was not a neat staircase. It was more like spilled liquid finding every crack. You leave the grand room and enter a smaller home belonging to a prosperous tradesman's family. The setting is less polished, but the desire is just as real. The furniture is plain but carefully kept. The fire smells sharper, the room closer, the cups thicker. Tea here is still a treat, perhaps saved for guests or special moments. The woman of the house handles it with pride. The drink allows the family to participate in fashion without owning an estate, which is exactly the sort of thing fashion finds both profitable and alarming. The cup here tastes stronger. It may have been brewed longer to stretch the leaves. The bitterness is more pronounced, softened with sugar if the household can afford it. You feel the warmth spread through your chest as rain continues outside. The ritual is smaller, but not less meaningful. Tea offers respectability. It creates a pause in the day. It gives conversation a centre. At the same time, some critics complain. They say tea is foreign, wasteful, unhealthy, or morally suspect. They worry women spend too much time at tea tables. They worry servants imitate their betters. They worry poor families spend money on tea instead of more substantial food. In fairness, critics of pleasure have always had remarkable stamina. Tea survives them by being pleasant, adaptable, and addictive in the socially acceptable sense. By evening, London glows with candlelight behind rain-blurred windows, in house after house. Water is heated, leaves are measured, cups are passed, and conversation softens around the table. Tea has entered English domestic life not by force, but by invitation, fashion, repetition, and desire. It offers warmth in a cold city, refinement in a smoky room, and a taste of distant trade made intimate. You lower your cup and feel the smooth porcelain cool against your fingers. The street outside remains muddy and loud, but inside the room there is a pocket of order. Steam curls upward, voices grow calmer, the small locked chest closes with a click. Tea has found the English home, and the home has begun to rearrange itself round the cup. You enter a bright room where sunlight falls across a table crowded with objects that seem far too delicate for the rough world that made them possible. Porcelain cups glow white and blue. Silver spoons catch the light. A sugar bowl sits at the centre, like a small temple to sweetness. The air smells of polished furniture, warm milk, faint perfume, and tea leaves opening in hot water. Outside, horses clatter through the street. Inside, refinement quietly arranges itself into a performance. Tea is no longer only a drink, it has become a stage. You sit near the table and watch a hostess prepare the setting with careful ease. The cups are placed just so. The sugar is cut into hard pale lumps. The milk waits in a small jug. A tea caddy rests nearby, locked or watched closely, because the leaves inside remain valuable. Every item says something. Every gesture has meaning. The room seems calm, but beneath the calm is a whole empire of goods, labour, taste, and status, politely pretending to be a pleasant afternoon. The mainstream historical fact is that tea, sugar, and porcelain became deeply connected in 18th century British consumer culture. Tea came largely from China. Porcelain was imported from China and later imitated in Europe. Sugar came from plantations in the Caribbean and other colonial regions. Together, they created a fashionable ritual built from global trade. One cup might contain leaves from Asia, sweetness from the Atlantic world, and ceramic beauty shaped by Chinese technology and European ambition. You lift a porcelain cup and feel how thin it is. Light almost passes through the rim. The surface is cool at first, then warms quickly as tea is poured. The liquid darkens inside the whiteness of the cup, making colour itself part of the pleasure. Porcelain matters because it shows the tea clearly, holds heat well enough, and looks wonderfully refined. It also allows people to admire themselves as people who own porcelain, which is not the least important function of beautiful objects. For centuries, Chinese porcelain had fascinated Europeans. It was strong, white, smooth, and mysterious to those who did not know how it was made. European potters tried to imitate it, producing tin-glazed earthenwares and eventually true hard paste porcelain in places such as Meissen in the early 18th century. This pursuit was not just artistic, it was commercial obsession with a polite face. Europe wanted the cup, the secret, and the profit. Tea drinking helped drive demand for ceramic sets cups, saucers, teapots, milk jugs, sugar bowls, slop bowls, and plates for small foods. You see them spread across the table like a little porcelain landscape. Blue landscapes, flower patterns, gilded rims, family crests, and fashionable motifs turn the tea table into a display of taste. Guests notice. Of course they notice. That is partly why the objects are there. Then there is sugar. The hostess drops a lump into a cup with silver tongs. It lands with a soft click, then begins to dissolve. The tea's bitterness softens. The drink becomes rounder, richer, easier for many European palates. Sugar changes tea from a brisk infusion into a comfort. It also links the gentle table to a brutal system of plantation labour. The sweetness in the cup carries a hidden history that the polished room does not speak aloud. The smell rising from the cup is now warmer, almost caramel-like beneath the tea's dryness. You sip and taste the balanced bitterness. Sweetness, heat, and milk, if it is added. Milk cools the drink and softens its edge. Some people add milk first, some after, and yes, even in early tea rooms, humans likely found ways to be quietly judgmental about it. Few topics reveal civilization's fragility like beverage order. A quirky tidbit from the porcelain and tea world is the fear that very hot tea might crack delicate cups, which may have contributed to some people pouring milk first to cool the vessel. Whether that fully explains the custom remains debated, but it is a charmingly practical theory. Imagine an entire etiquette argument beginning because someone did not want their expensive cup to explode. Fair enough. Porcelain does look elegant, but it does not forgive carelessness. Tea sets also helped shape domestic identity. A family could show prosperity by owning matching cups and proper accessories. Middle-class households used tea goods to perform respectability. Even people without aristocratic titles could create a refined space through objects, manners, and invitation. The tea table became a small theatre where class could be rehearsed and sometimes gently stretched. Historians still argue over how much tea culture empowered women as managers of domestic sociability, and how much it confined them within expectations of polite consumption. The tea table gave women visible authority in hosting, serving, conversation, and household taste. Yet it also tied feminine respectability to spending, manners, and careful self-presentation. The cup could be a tool, a symbol, and a cage with very pretty saucers. You move from a wealthy drawing room into a shop filled with imported goods. The air smells of paper wrapping, spices, wax, dust, and dry tea. Shelves hold canisters, cups, lacquered boxes, and shining metalware. A shopkeeper opens a container and lets a customer smell the leaves. Another customer examines porcelain cups, turning them toward the light. Shopping becomes part of tea culture. Desire does not simply sit at home, It walks into stores and asks the price. Printed advertisements praise teas by type, origin, strength, and supposed health benefits. They also praise sugar, ceramics, and accessories. The world around tea grows crowded with commerce. A person no longer buys only a drink. They buy a ritual, a social identity, and sometimes an entire table setting, because apparently a leaf can bring friends. You return to the tea table as afternoon dims. Candles are lit, and the porcelain shines more warmly now. The silver reflects small flames. The sugar bowl is half empty. Conversation moves gently from family news to trade gossip to the latest scandal, which everyone pretends to regret while listening very carefully. A spoon circles in a cup, making a soft musical ring. The sensory comfort is undeniable. The touch of warm porcelain, the sweetened steam against your face, the smooth table under your fingertips, the atmosphere of enclosure while the wider world remains cold, muddy, and uncertain. Tea offers order. It makes global systems feel domestic, manageable, and even charming. That is part of its power and part of its danger. Inside one cup, you now taste more than leaves. You taste sugar fields, kilns, ships, merchants, skilled hands, fashionable anxiety, and the human wish to turn consumption into meaning. Tea has gathered companions around itself, porcelain to hold it, sugar to soften it, silver to serve it, etiquette to frame it, and status to make everyone nervous. You set the cup down on its saucer. The sound is small and precise. Around the table, the ritual continues, graceful as a dance and complicated as an empire. The room glows with comfort, but the cup is no longer innocent. It is beautiful, sweet, warm, and deeply entangled with the world beyond the walls. You step onto the counting floor of a company office where the air smells of ink, sealing wax, damp wool, and tea packed tightly in wooden chests. Clerks bend over ledgers beneath tall windows, their quills scratching with a dry, insect-like rhythm. Outside, carts groan over cobbles and ship masts rise beyond the warehouses like a leafless forest. Inside, numbers march across paper in neat columns, turning distant hills, human labour, and ocean risk into profit. This is the world of the East India Company, where tea becomes tangled with monopoly, politics, finance, and imperial appetite. The cup may feel gentle in your hand, but the ledgers behind it are not gentle at all. They are ambitious, precise, and very fond of being obeyed. The mainstream historical fact is that the English East India Company held a powerful monopoly over British trade with Asia for much of the 17th and 18th centuries. Tea became one of its most important imports from China, especially as British demand grew. The company did not merely sell a beverage. It managed ships, negotiated access, handled silver payments, influenced government policy, and helped build a commercial empire with a tea chest at its centre. You walk through a warehouse near the Thames. The floorboards are gritty under your shoes. Men pry open crates, check labels, weigh goods, and mark inventories. The smell is extraordinary dry tea, wet rope, river mud, spices, tobacco, sweat, and oak soaked with years of weather. A chest is opened, and the leaves inside release a dark, faintly floral scent. Someone leans over, inspects the contents, and makes a note. Tea from China reaches Britain through a long and controlled system. Foreign merchants have limited access to Chinese ports, especially Canton during the period when trade is tightly regulated. European companies bring silver and other goods, then load ships with tea, porcelain, silk, and luxury items. The voyage is long, dangerous, and expensive. Storms can ruin cargo. War can threaten shipping. Delay can turn profit into panic. Yet demand keeps pulling the ships back. You feel the company's power in the structure of the room. Maps hang on walls. Routes are drawn across oceans. Ledgers list quantities, prices, duties, and sales. Men speak of Bohea, Hyson, Kongu, Souchong. names that enter British commercial language and household conversation. Tea is classified, priced, taxed, and auctioned. A leaf becomes a commodity, and commodities have a way of attracting both paperwork and trouble. At public tea auctions, buyers gather with sharp attention. The room smells of wool coats, tobacco smoke, paper, and samples warmed in little pots. Brokers inspect leaves, judge aroma, and estimate value. A good batch can mean profit. A poor batch can mean complaint, blending, or quiet disappointment. You hear murmurs ripple through the room as lots are offered. A hammer falls. Tea changes hands, though the actual leaves may still sit in chests elsewhere, waiting for delivery. A quirky tidbit from the company's tea trade is that chests were sometimes marked with mysterious symbols, abbreviations, and trade names that could confuse outsiders. Tea terminology became its own little forest of labels, qualities, and reputations. A customer might ask for one kind and receive another blended into respectability. The tea business, like many businesses, discovered early that confidence in naming can be almost as profitable as the thing itself. The company's monopoly shapes prices and access. High import duties make legal tea expensive, encouraging smuggling and adulteration. But official trade still grows, and the government benefits from tax revenue. The state, the company, and the consumer become linked in a triangular arrangement. The public wants tea. The company imports it, and the government taxes it. Everyone is satisfied, except when they are not, which is often. You sit in a company dining room as rain streaks the windows. A servant pours tea into cups while men discuss cargoes, wars, dividends, and parliamentary influence. The tea is warm and aromatic, but the conversation around it is cold with calculation. You taste bitterness beneath sugar and milk. It feels appropriate. This drink is now a comfort made from systems that are anything but comfortable. The East India Company is not only a merchant body. Over time, it becomes a territorial and political power in India, collecting revenues, maintaining armies, and influencing the lives of millions. Tea trade with China is only one part of its vast reach, but it sits within the same larger pattern: private profit backed by state support and military force when convenient. A cup poured in London is connected to ships, forts, treaties, clerks, soldiers, and officials who may never touch the leaves themselves. Historians still debate how to weigh the company's commercial innovation against the violence and exploitation built into its imperial expansion. Some emphasize its role in global trade, finance, and administration. Others focus on coercion, famine, corruption, and the damage caused by profit-driven rule. The tea ledgers do not contain the whole moral story. They contain quantities and prices, which is exactly why you must listen for the quieter human costs behind the scratching quills. In a shop, legal tea reaches customers in smaller amounts. The shop smells of paper packets, spices, wood shelves, and coal smoke from the street. A woman asks the price and hesitates. Tea is desirable, but not cheap. The shopkeeper measures leaves carefully, folds them into paper, and ties the parcel. The buyer slips it into her basket as if carrying a little piece of global trade home for supper. By candlelight, the company office grows quieter. Clerks close ledgers, wax seals harden, chests sit in rows, silent and valuable. Outside, the river moves under darkness, carrying barges, reflections, and the smell of tide water. Somewhere, a ship is preparing to leave. Somewhere else, another is coming in heavy with cargo. You hold a cup and feel its warmth against your palms. Steam rises softly, almost innocently. Yet inside that steam drift monopolies, taxes, auctions, maritime risk, Chinese trade restrictions, British desire, and company ambition. Tea has become more than a habit. It is now an engine of empire disguised as an evening comfort. You walk along a moonlit coast where the sea moves in black folds against the rocks, whispering, withdrawing, then returning with a hush like secrets being repeated. The air smells of salt, kelp, damp wool, wet sand, and tar from small boats pulled high above the tide. A lantern is quickly covered by a hand. Somewhere in the darkness, a horse stamps once and is silenced by a low murmur. Tea has become rebellious, not in the cup, of course. In the cup it is still warm, fragrant, and socially respectable. But before it reaches the table, it may pass through hands that do not appear in official ledgers. High taxes and growing appetite have created a shadow trade along the coasts of Britain and Ireland. Legal tea is expensive, smuggled tea is cheaper, and when people want something every day, they become remarkably flexible about the moral details of customs law. The mainstream historical fact is that tea smuggling became widespread in 18th century Britain, driven largely by heavy import duties and the popularity of the drink. Smugglers brought tea ashore secretly, often at night, avoiding taxes and selling it through networks that could reach deep inland. The government called it crime. Many consumers called it a bargain. History, as usual, depends a little on who is holding the receipt. You follow a narrow path down toward a hidden cove. Pebbles slide under your shoes. The wind presses cold against your cheeks. Below, a small boat scrapes softly against stone as men unload bundles wrapped against spray. Their movements are quick and practiced. No one wastes words. The cargo is carried in sacks, boxes, and sometimes smaller parcels easy to hide beneath cloaks, cartloads, or perfectly innocent-looking baskets. The soundscape is tense. Rope creaks, boots crunch on shingle, waves slap the hull. A gull cries once, rudely dramatic. Farther up the slope, pack horses wait with muffled bells. When the tea is loaded, the animals move inland through lanes, fields, and wooded tracks. By morning, the coast may look peaceful again, as if nothing happened except tide and moonlight. Smuggled tea did not remain only near the shore. It travelled through elaborate networks involving sailors, local guides, innkeepers, shopkeepers, carriers, and customers. Some communities depended on smuggling money. Others simply tolerated it. Coastal geography helped. Caves, coves, marshes, cliffs, and shifting weather gave smugglers cover. Officials could patrol, but they could not be everywhere. And smugglers made a profession of knowing exactly where everywhere was not. You enter an inn set back from the coast, its sign swinging in the wind with a tired groan. Inside, the air is warm and thick with wood smoke, spilled ale, damp coats, and something sweeter from a pot near the hearth. A woman behind the counter glances toward the door before pouring tea into a cup. The leaves may be illegal, but the scene feels domestic. That is part of the strangeness. Contraband becomes comfort with astonishing speed. The cup is strong. The tea is darker than expected, perhaps because it has been brewed hard to make the most of it. It smells smoky, earthy, and slightly musty from travel. You sip and taste bitterness wrapped in warmth. Around the room, people talk quietly. A fisherman rubs salt from his hands. A carrier warms his boots near the fire. Someone laughs too loudly, then remembers caution. Outside, the night presses against the windows. A quirky tidbit from the smuggling world is that tea could be hidden in wonderfully ordinary places under clothing, inside false compartments, tucked into hay wagons, or disguised among other goods. Women were sometimes involved in carrying small amounts beneath skirts or in household containers, using assumptions about respectability as camouflage. The empire may have had ships and laws, but Aunt Margaret with a suspiciously lumpy petticoat was not to be underestimated. Smuggling also encouraged adulteration. Some sellers mixed real tea with other leaves, used spent tea dried and coloured again, or added substances to improve appearance. This was not charming. It could be unpleasant or harmful. Customers wanted cheap tea, but cheapness invited trickery. A beautiful dark leaf might not be what it claimed. The tea trade, legal or illegal, always had room for both sophistication and fraud, because humans are nothing if not consistent. Historians still debate the exact scale of tea smuggling, since successful smuggling is not famous for leaving tidy paperwork. Official seizures show only what authorities caught, not what slipped through. Estimates vary, but scholars agree that illegal tea formed a major part of consumption during periods of high taxation. The shadows are difficult to measure, which is precisely why smugglers preferred them. You move from the inn to a village kitchen before dawn. The room is low-ceilinged and warm, with drying herbs hanging from beams. A fire glows red. The smell of bread, ash, wool, and tea blends into a homely sweetness. A family sits quietly while the first light gathers behind the shutters. The tea on the table may have come through a hidden cove hours earlier. Now it is poured into chipped cups and passed with sleepy gratitude. This is how smuggling softens itself in daily life. The danger is far away, folded into the night journey. The household sees only the affordable packet, the warm cup, the small pleasure before work begins. Law becomes abstract when tea is dear and wages are limited. A mother measuring leaves into a pot is not thinking of customs revenue. She is thinking of stretching comfort through a cold morning. The government eventually responds with stronger enforcement, but also with policy changes. Lowering tea duties in the late 18th century helps reduce smuggling by making legal tea more affordable. It is a very practical lesson. Sometimes the way to defeat a shadow market is not only more patrols, but fewer reasons for ordinary people to use it. Even smugglers struggle when legality becomes reasonably priced. Very inconvenient for the moonlit aesthetic. You return to the coast as dawn begins to pale the sky. The hidden cove is empty now. Seaweed glistens on the rocks. Foam curls around stones. The path holds hoof marks, already softening under mist. A customs rider passes in the distance. Too late, or perhaps just tired of being early for nothing. The wind smells clean, though you know the night has been busy. Tea in this world carries a thrill it never asked for. It passes through secrecy, risk, violence at times, cleverness, greed, necessity, and ordinary desire. It links smugglers in coves to families in kitchens, officials in offices to shopkeepers with private supplies. The state's hunger for revenue to the public's hunger for a cup. You hold one last mug near the shore, feeling its rough clay surface warm your chilled fingers. The tea tastes smoky, strong, and a little illicit, though perhaps that is your imagination enjoying itself. Waves slide over the stones. The sun lifts quietly behind the clouds. In the steam, rebellion looks surprisingly domestic, a hidden cargo, a locked door, a whispered price, and a nation unwilling to give up its tea. You stand beside Boston Harbor on a cold December evening, with the wind sliding off the water and finding every gap in your coat as if it has been personally invited. The air smells of salt, tar, smoke, wet wood, and the sour mud of the tide flats. Ships rock at anchor beneath a darkening sky. Their ropes groan. Their masts creak. Somewhere in town, bells sound faintly, and the streets hum with the restless energy of people who have argued themselves past politeness. Tea has become a political symbol, not because the leaves changed. They are still small, dry, fragrant, and slightly bitter, but the meaning around them has hardened. In British North America, tea is tied to taxation, representation, monopoly, and resentment toward Parliament. A cup that once suggested comfort now carries the taste of power. Very inconvenient, really. One minute you're trying to warm your hands, and the next your beverage has constitutional implications. The mainstream historical fact is clear on December 16th, 1773. American colonists in Boston destroyed a shipment of East India Company tea by throwing it into the harbour. The protest became known as the Boston Tea Party. It was a direct response to the Tea Act of 1773, which allowed the company to sell tea to the colonies under terms that many colonists saw as protecting monopoly power and confirming Parliament's right to tax them without their consent. You move through Boston streets as evening gathers. The town is crowded and tense. Boots strike frozen ground, cloaks flap in the wind, candles glow behind windows. The smell of chimney smoke settles low between houses. People speak in urgent clusters, their voices dropping when strangers pass. Some have gathered at the Old South Meeting House, where thousands debate what should happen to the tea ships waiting in the harbour. The issue is not simply the price of tea. In fact, the Tea Act could make legally imported tea cheaper than smuggled tea. That is the little twist in the story, the kind history enjoys placing where nobody asked for it. Many colonists object because accepting the tea feels like accepting Parliament's authority to tax them. The duty remains. The principle matters. A bargain cup can still taste like submission if the politics in it are strong enough. You feel the chill deepen as the meeting breaks and men move toward the waterfront. Some are disguised as Mohawk Indians, though the disguises are symbolic, rough, and improvised, rather than accurate representations. Faces are darkened, blankets and feathers appear. The point is theatrical distance, a way to act outside ordinary identity. It is also a strange colonial performance of indigeneity, revealing how protest can borrow symbols clumsily while claiming liberty for itself. At Griffin's Wharf, the ships wait the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver. Their hulls are dark against the water, lanterns flicker, the tide slaps against the pilings with a steady, cold sound. You hear boots on planks, low commands, the scrape of hatch covers. Men climb aboard with purpose. They do not burn the ships. They do not steal the tea for themselves. They target the cargo. Crates are hauled up from the holds. The wood is rough beneath gloved hands. Hatchets strike. Chests split open with sharp cracks. Dry leaves spill into the freezing air, releasing a scent that seems almost gentle, grassy, tannic, faintly sweet, entirely unsuited to revolution. Then the tea is lifted and thrown overboard. It hits the water in dark bursts, spreading across the surface like broken night. A quirky tidbit from this event is that some participants reportedly tried to prevent private theft by shaking tea out of people's shoes and clothing. Protest, yes. Personal souvenir shopping, no. The destruction was meant to be disciplined political theatre, not a midnight discount market. Human nature, naturally, required supervision. You watch the harbour slowly darken with floating leaves. The sound is strangely repetitive. Crack, lift, splash. Crack, lift, splash. Men work for hours. Onlookers gather quietly along the shore. There is excitement, fear, and a kind of stunned awareness that a line has been crossed. The cold air bites at cheeks and fingers. Tea dust clings to clothes. The water carries away what had been meant for cups, tables, shops, and revenue accounts. Not everyone in the colonies approves. Some consider the destruction of property reckless. Others see it as necessary resistance. Loyalists are horrified. Patriots are energised. Merchants worry. Officials rage. The British government responds with the Coercive Acts in 1774, closing Boston's port and tightening control over Massachusetts. Measures meant to punish one town help unite opposition across the colonies. Tea has not caused the entire American Revolution by itself, but it has become one of its most vivid sparks. Historians still debate how to interpret the Boston Tea Party's deeper meaning. Some emphasize constitutional principle and resistance to taxation without representation. Others stress economic rivalry, smuggling interests, crowd politics, and the role of radical organizers. The event is simple in image and complex in motive. A chest goes into the water. Behind it stand years of argument, trade, fear, ideology, and profit. You follow the scent of wet tea through the cold night. It clings to the harbour and mixes with salt and tar. The leaves do not vanish immediately. They drift, sink, gather against the shore, and stain the water. In the morning, people will see evidence of the protests scattered along the tide line. What was supposed to be consumed privately has become public spectacle. In a nearby home, a woman heats water but does not pour imported tea. Some colonists turn to herbal substitutes called liberty teas, made from local plants such as raspberry leaf, mint, or other herbs. The taste is different, sometimes pleasant, sometimes a brave performance of patriotism. You can almost hear someone saying it is just as good as real tea, with the strained optimism of a person lying for the cause. Tea boycotts give women political importance in daily life, since women often manage household consumption. Refusing tea becomes a domestic act with public meaning. The table becomes a site of resistance. What is bought, brewed, served, or refused matters. Politics enters the cupboard, which is both powerful and deeply annoying for anyone who only wanted a warm drink. You stand at the harbour once more as night settles completely. The ships are quieter now. The men have gone. The water moves with slow, dark patience, carrying the ruined cargo in its tide. Your hands are cold. Your face stings. The smell of tea lingers, oddly peaceful after so much urgency. In this harbour, tea becomes argument made visible. It is monopoly and resistance, empire and protest, law and defiance, all floating together under a winter sky. A drink meant for polite tables has been turned into a message no government can easily ignore. The cup has spilled, and the world around it will not return to stillness. You enter Canton at the edge of the Pearl River, where the air is heavy with humidity, river mud, incense, frying oil, and the damp wooden smell of warehouses packed with goods. Boats crowd the water so closely they seem almost stitched together. Oars dip and rise. Porters shout across the docks. A bell rings somewhere behind the foreign factories, its sound softened by mist and distance. Tea is now part of a darker bargain. The leaves still smell clean when a chest is opened. They still curl and twist in beautiful shades of green, brown, and black. They still make a cup that can calm a room and warm cold hands. Yet around them gathers a web of silver, opium, debt, diplomacy, and violence. The drink that once looked gentle in a porcelain cup is now tied to the machinery of the empire in one of its most troubling forms. The mainstream historical fact is that Britain bought enormous amounts of tea from China, and for a long time Chinese merchants wanted payment largely in silver. British demand for tea grew so strong that silver flowed heavily toward China. To correct this trade imbalance, British merchants increasingly sold opium grown in India into China. Even though the Qing state tried to restrict and suppress the trade, tea, silver, and opium became linked in a chain that reshaped both empires. You stand near a warehouse where clerks inspect tea chests bound for foreign ships. The room smells of dry leaves, paper, lacquer, dust, and sweat. Chinese Hong merchants, licensed to deal with foreigners, negotiate under layers of rule, custom, and caution. Foreign traders live and work in a restricted district, unable to move freely through the empire. Commerce here is busy, profitable, and tightly managed. Everyone watches everyone else. Very relaxing. If your idea of relaxation includes suspicion and paperwork, a chest of tea is lifted onto a scale. Men record its weight. The leaves are graded and valued outside. The river glitters under a pale sky, crowded with sampans, junks, and European ships waiting for cargo. You hear water slapping against hulls, ropes straining, sailors calling, and the dull thud of crates moving over planks. Trade has a rhythm, and in Canton it sounds like labour multiplied by desire. The Qing government does not need British woolens or manufactured goods in the same way Britain craves Chinese tea, porcelain, and silk. That imbalance matters. Silver becomes the bridge, and Britain grows uneasy as silver drains away. In India, where the East India Company has expanded its power, opium is cultivated under systems of control and revenue. The drug is then sold through private merchants and smuggled into China. Officially, The company keeps a careful distance from direct illegal import into China. Convenient distance, naturally, is one of the empire's favourite pieces of furniture. You move from the tea warehouse to a riverside scene where opium enters the story more quietly. Small boats glide at night, packages are transferred, brokers whisper, the smell here is different damp rope, stagnant water, tobacco smoke, and a sweet, heavy odour from opium dens tucked into urban shadows. The trade is illegal under Qing law, but demand spreads, corruption grows, and enforcement becomes difficult. The human cost is not abstract. Addiction harms families, drains savings, and weakens communities. Officials worry about silver leaving China as opium imports rise. The court sees not merely a moral problem, but an economic and political crisis. The cup of tea in Britain and the pipe of opium in China are connected by routes that polite consumers may never imagine. Comfort in one place can cast a long shadow somewhere else. A quirky tidbit from this uneasy world is that tea tasting in Canton could be extremely refined. Professional tasters examine dry leaves, infused samples, aroma, liquor colour, and spent leaves with impressive skill. While opium ships hovered in the background of the wider trade system, specialists were still debating whether a batch of tea had the right fragrance or finish. History loves these uncomfortable contrasts, delicate tasting notes on one table, imperial crisis on another. The Qing official Lin Zexu becomes central to the conflict. When he is sent to Canton in 1839 to suppress the opium trade, he orders foreign merchants to surrender their opium stocks, and large quantities are destroyed. You imagine the scene near Human, where confiscated opium is mixed and disposed of in a public act of state authority. The air is sharp with salt, mud, and tension. Officials supervise. Workers labour. Foreign merchants watch with anger and alarm. Historians still debate how much the First Opium War was driven by moral outrage, commercial pressure, imperial pride, legal conflict, or the British demand for diplomatic equality and market access. The war cannot be reduced to one cause, though opium sits at its centre. Trade, sovereignty, addiction, revenue, and national honour all tighten into a knot. Then ships and guns begin to pull it apart. When war comes in 1839, British naval power overwhelms Qing defences in key places. The conflict ends with the Treaty of Nanjing in 1842, which forces China to cede Hong Kong, pay indemnities, and open several treaty ports to British trade. This marks a major shift in China's relationship with Western powers. Tea remains central to British life, but now the conditions around trade have been transformed by force. You walk through a treaty port street where foreign buildings rise near Chinese shops and homes. The atmosphere feels changed, uneasy, layered. The smells of tea, coal smoke, river water, and foreign cooking mingle. Missionaries, merchants, sailors, officials, labourers, and interpreters move through shared spaces shaped by inequality. The old Canton system has cracked. New ports open, new pressures arrive. In Britain, meanwhile, tea continues to flow into homes, shops, factories, and parlours. People pour it before breakfast, during work breaks, in afternoon rooms, and beside evening fires. Many drinkers know little of Canton's tensions or India's opium fields. The cup feels familiar, innocent, necessary. That is one of the quiet tragedies of global consumption. The hand holding the comfort may not see the hand forced to pay for it. You sit near the Pearl River at dusk. The water turns bronze under the lowering sun. A tea merchant closes his books. A boatman coils a rope. Somewhere, a kettle begins to sing. You lift a cup, and the scent is still beautiful warm leaf, faint flowers, a clean dryness at the edge of the breath. The taste is calm, yet the history inside it is not. Tea has become entangled with silver hunger, opium revenue, imperial arrogance, Qing resistance, and war. The leaf remains small, but the systems around it have grown vast and dangerous. In the steam rising before you, comfort and consequence drift together, inseparable now. Like two currents meeting in the same dark river, you move into the humid hills of Assam, where the air feels thick enough to drink before any kettle is even lit. Mist hangs low over forests of bamboo, sal, cane, and wild growth. Rainwater slides from leaf to leaf with soft ticking sounds. The ground is dark, damp, and alive beneath your feet. Leeches, naturally, are also interested in history, though one wishes they would choose a less personal research method. The scent here is powerful wet earth, crushed fern, wood smoke, animal musk, and the sharp greenness of leaves bruised by hands or rain. Insects hum in layers. Birds call from hidden branches. The atmosphere is not the tidy calm of a garden. It is dense, tangled, and watchful. Tea is no longer only something imported from China. It is becoming the object of imperial ambition in Indian soil. The mainstream historical fact is that Britain developed large-scale tea cultivation in Assam during the 19th century, after identifying indigenous tea plants growing in the region. This changed the global tea trade dramatically. British merchants and officials wanted to reduce dependence on Chinese tea, especially after the tensions surrounding trade, silver, and opium. If tea could be grown under British imperial control, the empire could drink from its own plantations. You stand near a clearing where local knowledge meets colonial desire. The Singpho people and other communities in the region were familiar with tea-like plants and their uses. British observers did not discover the plant in the sense of making it exist. Though imperial stories often enjoy pretending that nothing is real until a European writes it down, local people knew the landscape. Colonial officials wanted to classify, cultivate, and profit from it. In the 1820s and 1830s, British interest in Assam tea increased, with figures such as Robert Bruce and Charles Alexander Bruce associated with early reports and cultivation efforts. The plant found in Assam was related to Chinese tea, but had larger leaves and grew well in the warm, wet conditions of the region. This mattered deeply. It suggested that India could become a major tea producer, not merely a place through which opium revenue passed, or where officials ruled from desks and forts. You walk through a nursery where young tea plants stand in damp rows. Their leaves shine under the clouded light. Workers clear land, dig, plant, prune, and build the first structures of plantation life. The sound is constant machetes striking vegetation, axes biting wood, rain tapping hats, voices calling across slopes. The smell of cut plants rises fresh and almost sweet, but beneath it is mud, sweat, and smoke from burned brush. Tea cultivation here is not a peaceful botanical story. It is tied to land control, labour systems, profit, and experiment. Forests are cleared, roads are cut, factories are built to process leaves. Colonial officials and planters test methods of plucking, withering, rolling, oxidizing, drying, packing, and shipping. Some techniques are borrowed from Chinese knowledge, some are adapted through trial, error, and local conditions. Many mistakes are made, which is comforting only if you are not the one paying for them or labouring through them. The British also tried to obtain Chinese tea knowledge directly. In the 19th century, botanists and plant hunters worked to bring tea seeds, plants, and expertise from China to India. The most famous figure is Robert Fortune, a Scottish botanist who travelled in China in disguise and sent tea plants and Chinese tea workers to British India. It was plant hunting, espionage, botany, and costume drama all in one. Very serious empire, wearing borrowed clothes. A quirky tidbit about Fortune is that he sometimes dressed in Chinese clothing and wore a queue hairstyle to move through areas where foreigners were restricted. He was not always convincing, but apparently convincing enough at the right moments. The image is strangely theatrical, a botanist slipping through tea districts, gathering seeds and methods, while the future of British tea waits in boxes and Wardian cases, those glass containers used to transport living plants by sea. Yet Assam's tea story is not simply imported Chinese expertise placed onto Indian land. The Assam plant itself proves strong and commercially valuable. Over time, Assam teas become known for bold flavour, strength, and deep colour, especially suited to black tea styles favoured in Britain. You taste a cup made from Assam leaves. It is brisk, malty, and full-bodied. The steam smells warm and rich, with a faint sweetness like grain and rain-dark wood. It grips the tongue more firmly than many delicate Chinese teas. This is tea with shoulders. Historians still debate how to balance the roles of indigenous knowledge, British botanical science, Chinese expertise, and plantation capitalism in the making of the Indian tea industry. Older imperial accounts often celebrated European discovery and enterprise, while newer scholarship gives more attention to local communities, coerced labour, environmental change, and the global politics behind cultivation. The question is not only who found the plant, but who controlled its future. You enter a processing shed where the air is warm, damp, and heavy with the smell of withering leaves. Freshly plucked shoots are spread out in layers. Their green scent begins to change as moisture leaves them. Workers roll leaves by hand or through machines, breaking the cells so oxidation can begin. The aroma deepens from fresh grass to fruit, malt, and tannin. Heat dries the leaves, locking in flavour for the journey ahead. The factory sounds like a rough orchestra, wooden trays sliding, metal parts turning, feet moving, voices calling, rain hammering the roof. Outside, plantation rows begin to replace wild growth. Neat lines of tea bushes follow the contours of the land, clipped to waist height for plucking. From a distance, the slopes look orderly, almost serene. Up close, the order is labour. Hands must return again and again to gather the tender shoots. Weather must be endured. Supervisors count output. Bodies ache. The beautiful pattern on the hillside is written in work. The British dream is commercial independence from China. Indian tea is promoted in Britain through advertising, exhibitions, and imperial pride. It becomes possible to say that tea, once the symbol of dependence on Chinese trade, can now be supplied by territories under British rule. The cup becomes patriotic in a new way, though the patriotism belongs mostly to those enjoying the profit and the drink, not always to those bending in the fields. You pause at the edge of a plantation as evening rain begins. The drops strike broad leaves with a soft, full sound. Mist slides through the rows. A worker's basket rests against a post, damp and fragrant. Your hands brush the tea leaves, and they feel smooth, cool, and slightly leathery. The air is green and wet, filled with frogs, insects, and distant human voices fading toward the workers' lines. Assam tea carries the taste of climate and empire together. It is born from local plants, colonial hunger, stolen knowledge, botanical ambition, and relentless labour. In the cup, it feels strong and comforting. In the fields, it feels complicated. The leaf has taken root in Indian soil, and with that rooting, the balance of global tea begins to shift. You climb into the highlands of Ceylon, where mist slips between ridges like pale cloth being drawn slowly over the hills. The air is cooler here than in the lowlands, washed by rain and scented with wet grass, eucalyptus, red earth, and wood smoke from workers' lines tucked along the slopes. Water runs everywhere down gullies, over stones, through fern-shadowed channels, tapping and murmuring as if the mountains are quietly speaking to themselves. The land looks peaceful at first glance. Tea bushes spread in sculpted rows across the hills, each line following the curve of the earth with almost impossible neatness. The green is intense, bright where sunlight touches it, blue-grey where cloud shadows pass. But this landscape was not always tea. It became tea through crisis, calculation, and the restless appetite of empire. The mainstream historical fact is that Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, became a major tea producer in the late 19th century after a disease devastated its coffee plantations. Before tea dominated the highlands, coffee had been the island's great plantation crop under British colonial rule. Planters had invested heavily in it. Roads, estates, processing buildings, and labour systems had grown around coffee. Then coffee leaf rust spread with ruthless patience. You step into an abandoned coffee estate in your mind. The air smells of damp leaves, rot, and old timber. Coffee bushes stand weakened, their leaves marked by orange fungal dust. Workers move through the rows with little hope of saving the crop. The disease, caused by Himalaya vastatrix, attacked coffee leaves and reduced yields so severely that the industry collapsed across much of the island. For planters, it was disaster. For tea, it was an opening. A planter stands beneath a veranda, staring at the hills with the expression of a man whose accounts have become more frightening than the weather. Coffee had promised wealth. Now the bushes are failing, and the estate must either change or die. Tea, already proving successful in parts of India, becomes the replacement. The empire does not mourn crops for long. It looks for the next profitable leaf. You walk through a nursery where tea seedlings grow under shade. Their young leaves gleam after rain. The soil is rich and damp, clinging to boots. Men clear old coffee fields, dig drains, terrace slopes, and plant tea in careful rows. The sound of work fills the morning hose striking earth. Blades cutting brush, carts creaking, water splashing in ditches, voices calling through mist. The smell is sharp with cut vegetation and smoke from burning debris. James Taylor is a central figure in Ceylon's tea story. In the 1860s, he helped develop tea cultivation and processing on the Lulakondera estate, experimenting with methods that would support commercial production. His work became part of the island's transition from coffee to tea. You can imagine a small factory where leaves are withered, rolled, oxidized, and fired, while outside, the hills wait under rain. Nothing looks world-changing yet. It looks damp, difficult, and very dependent on getting the drying right. A quirky tidbit about early Ceylon tea is that some of the first processing was done with improvised equipment, including hand-rolling leaves on tables and using simple drying arrangements before larger machinery became common. The grand global industry began partly with experiments that were less glamorous than advertisements later suggested. Tea history often looks elegant in the cup and slightly chaotic in the shed. You enter a tea factory as the afternoon rain thickens. The building smells of warm leaf, timber, oil, and steam. Freshly plucked leaves arrive in baskets, green and springy to the touch. They are spread out to wither, losing moisture as air moves over them. Then they're rolled, bruised, and twisted so their juices meet oxygen. The scent changes. It deepens from raw grass to fruit, honey, malt, and tannin. Drying heat finishes the transformation, turning soft leaves into the dark curled tea that can travel by ship. Ceylon tea becomes prized for its brightness, briskness, and clean flavour, with differences depending on altitude and district. High-grown teas can taste lively, fragrant, and sharp in a refreshing way. Lower-grown teas may be fuller and stronger. You lift a cup and see the liquor shine copper red in the light. The steam smells crisp, floral, and slightly citrusy. The taste is brisk, clean, and drying, like mountain rain given a polite colonial education. Historians still argue about how much credit should be given to individual planters such as Taylor, compared with wider systems of colonial capital, scientific agriculture, transport infrastructure, and labour migration. A heroic planter story is simple and easy to tell, but plantations do not run on one man's cleverness. They require land, money, roads, markets, machines, and workers whose names are far less often remembered. Those workers are essential. Many were Tamil labourers brought from southern India under harsh conditions to work on Ceylon's plantations. They cleared, planted, plucked, carried, and processed the crop that made the island famous. The hills may look serene from a distance, but plantation life is built from repetitive labour, strict supervision, low wages, and isolation. Beauty and hardship sit side by side, which is an arrangement history seems to use far too often. You walk along a narrow path between tea rows at dusk. The leaves brush your sleeves, cool and wet. A woman with a basket strapped across her back plucks the tender top leaves and bud with quick, practiced movements. The soft snap of each pluck is almost musical. Mist beads on her hair. Her fingers move steadily despite the chill. The basket slowly fills with the future of someone else's breakfast table. The railway also matters. Lines built through the highlands help carry tea from estates down toward Colombo, where it can be shipped across the world. You hear a train in the distance, its whistle softened by fog. Iron wheels grind along wet tracks. The sound cuts through the mountains, linking hillside labour to auction rooms, warehouses, ships, shops, and kitchens far away. By night, rain settles into a softer rhythm. Lamps glow in workers' dwellings. The factory remains warm, breathing out the smell of drying leaf. Somewhere, a clerk writes figures into a ledger. Somewhere else, a buyer tastes samples and judges quality by colour, aroma, and bite. The island's identity is changing, one harvest at a time. Ceylon's tea story begins with the ruin of coffee and grows into a new plantation world. Disease clears the way. Colonial enterprise fills the space. Labour gives the crop its body. Rain, altitude, soil, and skill give it flavour. In the cup, the result is bright and fragrant, almost cheerful. On the hillside, it is also a record of transformation, loss, endurance, and the green persistence of a leaf that remade an island. You wake before sunrise in a plantation settlement where the darkness is soft, damp, and already stirring with work. A rooster calls from somewhere behind a row of small houses. Then another answers, because apparently even birds enjoy unnecessary meetings. Smoke begins to lift from cooking fires. The air smells of wet earth, ash, boiled grain, old timber, and tea leaves breathing in the dark fields beyond the path. The houses stand close together, their walls holding the night's coolness. Inside, people rise quietly. A child coughs. A metal pot scrapes against stone. Water is poured. Cloth is wrapped. Baskets are checked. And hands begin the day before the sun has properly introduced itself. The atmosphere is not dramatic. It is routine. And that is what makes it powerful. Plantation history lives in repetition. Tea workers are the hidden hands behind the global cup. The mainstream historical fact is that large tea plantations in places such as India and Ceylon depended heavily on labourers recruited, transported, and often controlled under harsh colonial systems. Many workers came from poor rural communities, including Adivasi groups in India and Tamil labourers from southern India and Ceylon. They entered landscapes shaped by debt, contract, distance, and limited choices. You walk with a group heading toward the fields. The path is muddy, and the wet soil pulls at your feet. Mist hangs low over the rows of tea bushes. Each bush is clipped into a low table of leaves, green and glossy under the first grey light. The sound of footsteps spreads across the slope, joined by the rustle of baskets, the soft slap of damp cloth, and the murmured talk of people saving their louder voices for later. Plucking begins with the tender top shoots, often described as 2 leaves and a bud. It sounds delicate, almost poetic. In practice, it is demanding work. Fingers must move quickly and accurately for hours. The body bends, reaches, shifts, and carries. A basket fills slowly, then heavily. The strap presses across the forehead or shoulders. Moisture soaks into clothing. Sun burns through the mist by late morning. and the field changes from cool silver to bright heat. You stand beside a worker whose fingers move with astonishing speed. Snap, gather, drop, snap, gather, drop. The leaves make a soft whisper as they fall into the basket. Her hands are roughened by work, but her touch is precise. Bad plucking can damage future growth. Careless harvesting lowers quality. The elegance in the cup begins with skill that is often underpaid and overlooked. A supervisor walks along the row, checking pace and quantity. Plantation systems rely on measurement. Weight matters. Daily targets matter. Time matters. Workers may be paid according to output or judged by quotas, and the pressure settles over the field like another layer of weather. The rows look peaceful from far away, but up close they are full of counting. A quirky tidbit from plantation life is that workers sometimes developed songs, jokes, and teasing rhythms around plucking, turning repetitive labour into a shared soundscape. The songs could keep time, lighten exhaustion, carry gossip, or hide complaint in playful words. A tea field might look silent in a postcard, but in lived reality it could hum with voices, laughter, and sharp commentary about bosses who, shockingly, were not always beloved. The sensory world is intense. Leaves brush against your wrists, cool and slick from mist. The smell of fresh tea is green and slightly bitter, mixed with sweat, damp cotton, and the mineral scent of hillside soil. Insects whine near your ears. Somewhere a bird calls from a shade tree. As the sun climbs, the air grows warmer, and the basket strap digs harder into skin. Plantation labour is not only field work. Leaves must be carried to collection points, weighed, transported to factories, withered, rolled, oxidized, dried, sorted, packed, and moved to markets. Men, women, and children have all played different roles in these systems depending on period and place. Women often became especially associated with plucking because plantation managers valued their speed and precision, though this association also helped justify low wages and gendered expectations. You enter a weighing shed where baskets are emptied onto scales. The smell of fresh leaf is suddenly overwhelming, like crushed grass after rain, but deeper and more tannic. A clerk records numbers. Workers watch the scale closely. A few extra pounds can matter. A shortfall can mean trouble. Leaves fall in soft heaps, beautiful and fragile. Though the system around them is anything but soft, historians still argue about how to interpret worker agency within plantation systems. Some emphasize coercion, isolation, and structural violence. Others point to survival strategies, community building, strikes, desertion, negotiation, religious life, and everyday resistance. Both truths can exist together. People were constrained by harsh conditions, yet they still made choices, formed relationships, preserved customs, and found ways to push back when possible. You move through the workers' lines at midday. Food is cooked over small fires. Rice, lentils, vegetables, or simple stews scent the air. Children play in dust and mud. A woman washes clothes, beating fabric against stone with a wet slap. Someone repairs a basket. Someone else lies down for a few minutes, eyes closed, while the plantation keeps its invisible clock running. Rest is not always peace. Sometimes it is only a brief negotiation with exhaustion. Life in these settlements can be marked by poor housing, limited medical care, debt, disease, and dependence on estate authorities. Yet the communities also create festivals, shrines, songs, kinship networks, and shared memory. A small shrine under a tree may hold flowers, ash, and oil lamps. The smell of incense mixes with cooking smoke. A drum sounds during a celebration. Even under constraint, people build worlds of meaning. You return to the field as afternoon light turns softer. The tea rows glow bright green against the darker trees. Rain gathers again in the distance, a grey curtain moving across the hills. Workers hurry to finish. The first drops strike leaves with a gentle patter, then become a steady hiss. The basket on your back feels heavier in the wet air. Your fingers are cold now, stained faintly green. At the factory, the machines begin their evening labour. The fresh leaves from many hands enter a process that will erase the individuality of those hands. By the time the tea reaches a shop shelf, it may carry a brand name, an estate name, or a cheerful picture of hills. It rarely carries the names of the people who plucked it. That silence is part of the history too. Night settles over the plantation. Lamps appear in workers' houses, small and golden against the mist. The fields darken into soft shapes. Somewhere, someone sings quietly while washing a child's hair. Somewhere, a ledger closes. Somewhere, tea leaves dry in warm air, preparing for a journey to distant cups. You hold a finished cup and breathe in its fragrance. It is comforting, familiar, even beautiful. But now the warmth includes more than flavour. It carries footsteps before dawn, fingers moving through wet leaves, baskets pressing against bone, songs in the field, arguments over weight, small acts of endurance, and communities making life under difficult skies. Tea is never only leaf and water, it is labour made drinkable, memory made fragrant, and the quiet presence of people whose work has warmed the world without always being seen. You step into the 20th century with the sound of machines humming behind brick walls, streetcars grinding along rails, and factory whistles calling people into days measured by clocks. The air smells of coal smoke, wet pavement, newsprint, metal, and the warm tannic scent of tea brewing in kitchens, offices, railway stations, and crowded canteens. The leaf has travelled through courts, caravans, harbours, plantations, and warehouses. Now it enters the age of convenience. Tea becomes faster, more packaged or more advertised, and more ordinary in the best and strangest ways. It no longer needs a locked chest, a formal table, or a merchant's careful explanation. It can sit in a paper packet, wait in a grocery store, or dangle from a string like a tiny parachute for tired people. Very dignified, naturally. After all that empire building, tea finds itself bobbing in a mug beside a workplace sink. The mainstream historical fact is that the tea bag became widely popular in the 20th century, especially in the United States and later in Britain and other markets. Earlier forms of measured tea packets existed, but commercial tea bags helped change daily brewing by making it easier, cleaner, and quicker. The basic idea was simple. Put leaves in a porous container, add hot water, remove the container, and avoid loose leaves floating around like confused pond life. You stand in a small shop where boxes of tea line the shelves. Their labels promise strength, freshness, purity, comfort, energy, elegance, empire, family, and occasionally a level of emotional stability no beverage can honestly guarantee. The packaging is colourful and confident. Brands compete for trust. Instead of judging leaves in a market basket, customers now judge names, logos, slogans, and the comforting feeling that a familiar box will taste the same every time. Standardization becomes one of modern tea's great powers. Blenders combine teas from different regions to create consistent flavour. Assam might give body, Ceylon might give brightness, Kenyan tea might add colour and briskness, Chinese teas might offer fragrance or specialty appeal. The result is a cup designed not around one hillside but around a repeatable experience. You may never know the exact origin of every leaf, but you know what breakfast is supposed to taste like. You enter a blending room where the air is thick with aroma. Samples sit in rows dark, wiry leaves, golden tips, broken grades, dust, fannings, and carefully labelled lots. Professional tasters move from cup to cup, slurping noisily to spread the liquid across the palate. It is not rude here, it is science with sound effects. The room smells of malt, hay, flowers, smoke, fruit, and tannin, the tasters spit, judge, compare, and make notes with impressive seriousness. A quirky tidbit from modern tea history is that smaller broken leaves, fannings, and dust, once considered less visually glamorous than whole leaves, proved especially useful for tea bags because they infuse quickly and strongly. The humble little particles that might not dazzle in a glass jar become champions of speed. Not all heroes are whole leaf. Some are basically crumbs with ambition. You hold a tea bag between your fingers. It feels light, dry, papery, and faintly fragrant. Drop it into hot water and the colour blooms quickly, spreading through the cup in amber clouds. The string grows damp, steam rises, the process is almost too easy. No strainer, no pot, no ceremony required, just heat, water, and a small packet delivering reliability to a person who may be late for work and spiritually unavailable for refinement. Tea also changes through iced tea. In the United States, cold tea becomes especially popular, shaped by climate, sugar, refrigeration, restaurants, and mass culture. Tall glasses clink with ice, lemon slices float near the surface. Condensation runs down the glass and cools your fingers. The smell is lighter, mixed with citrus, sugar, and summer air. On a hot porch, with cicadas buzzing in the trees, iced tea feels less like a descendant of ancient medicine and more like weather management. The famous story says iced tea became widely noticed at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, when a tea merchant supposedly added ice to hot tea during warm weather to attract customers. It is a charming tale, but historians still debate whether that moment truly invented or popularized iced tea. Since cold tea recipes existed earlier, the fair may have helped the story, but not necessarily the drink's birth. History enjoys a neat origin story. Reality usually arrives early, waits around, and lets someone else take credit. Advertising gives tea new personalities. It can be wholesome, patriotic, feminine, energizing, soothing, slimming, exotic, traditional, modern, or family-friendly, depending on what the market needs that afternoon. Posters show smiling mothers, elegant hostesses, rugged workers, cheerful children, and landscapes so green they look as if rain has hired a public relations team. Tea is sold not only as taste, but as a feeling you can buy by the box. You sit in a British factory canteen during a break. The room smells of steam, metal, bread, margarine, damp coats, and strong black tea. Mugs are thick and chipped. The tea is hot, dark, and milky, with enough strength to stand up politely and introduce itself. Workers wrap both hands around their cups. The break is brief, but important. Tea marks time. It divides labour into bearable pieces. It says, pause here, breathe here, complain here, then continue. In offices, hospitals, trains, army camps, roadside cafes, and suburban kitchens, tea becomes part of routine. Electric kettles speed the process, supermarkets widen access, instant tea appears, powdered and practical, though not always beloved by people with delicate feelings about flavour. Ready-to-drink bottled teas later expand the category again, turning tea into a cold commercial beverage for vending machines, convenience stores, and people walking somewhere with one hand full. The industrial age also creates new tea powers beyond Asia. Kenya, for example, becomes a major tea producer in the 20th century, with smallholder farms and large estates contributing to global supply. Tea is no longer centered only on China, India, Sri Lanka, and Japan. It grows across Africa, Southeast Asia, and beyond, shaped by colonial histories, post-colonial economies, changing tastes, and the global demand for affordable cups. You stand at a modern packaging line where machines fold, seal, fill, tag, and box tea bags at dazzling speed. The sound is constant clicking, sliding, stamping, rustling. The smell is dry and rich, filling the air with tannic warmth. Workers monitor the line, adjust settings, check quality, and stack cartons. Tea here is precise, mechanical, efficient. The romance has not vanished, but it now wears a hairnet and follows safety procedures. By evening, you sit in a small kitchen with a mug in your hands. Rain taps the window. A kettle cools on the counter. The tea bag rests in a saucer, spent and sagging, having performed its tiny duty. The cup is ordinary, and that is its quiet triumph. Tea has survived modernization by becoming both global product and personal ritual. It can be bagged, bottled, iced, blended, branded, instant, premium, cheap, ceremonial, casual, sweetened, unsweetened, milky, lemony, or plain. The industrial world tries to simplify it, package it, and sell it by the million. Yet when steam rises toward your face, the old spell remains. Leaf meets water, warmth gathers, the day softens, even inside the machine age. You sit at a small table while the world grows quiet around you, and a cup of tea rests between your hands like a little weather system of warmth, fragrance, and memory. Steam rises in slow curls. The air smells of dry leaves, clean water, ceramic warmed by touch, and the faint sweetness of whatever room you have chosen for resting. Outside, night presses softly against the windows. Inside, the cup glows with amber light. Tea has become so ordinary that its strangeness is easy to miss. It is a leaf from a shrub, transformed by weather, soil, hands, fire, trade, taste, and time. It can be green, black, white, yellow, oolong, dark, powdered, pressed, bagged, bottled, iced, salted, buttered, sweetened, spiced, or taken plain with the very serious expression of someone who believes additives are a moral collapse. It can be ceremony or convenience. It can sit in a palace or a paper cup. The mainstream historical fact is that tea is now one of the most widely consumed beverages in the world, second only to water in many common accounts of global drinking habits. Its reach is immense because it adapts so easily to local customs. In one country, it is sipped from tiny glasses. In another, it is whisked into a bright green foam. Elsewhere, it is boiled with milk and spices, poured over ice, brewed in a samovar, served in a clay pot, or carried in a thermos to work. You travel in thought across this tea world. In Morocco, mint tea pours from a height into small glasses, fragrant with sugar and fresh leaves, the stream flashing in the light before it lands. In Turkey, black tea glows ruby red in tulip-shaped glasses, held between fingers while ferries cross the Bosphorus and gulls argue overhead. In Russia, a samovar hums, warming rooms through long winters. In India, masala chai simmers with milk, ginger, cardamom, and black tea, filling streets with spice and steam. In Britain, a kettle clicks off in a kitchen, and someone says the tea is ready with the solemnity usually reserved for national events. In Japan, matcha is whisked with calm precision, each movement carrying centuries of aesthetic thought. In China, gongfu tea invites patience through small pots, repeated infusions, and careful attention to aroma. In Tibet, butter tea nourishes against cold heights. In the American South, iced sweet tea waits in a sweating glass, cold enough to forgive the weather for being dramatic. A quirky tidbit of modern tea culture is that people still argue passionately over tiny details: milk first or milk last, bag in or bag out, one squeeze or absolutely no squeezing, sugar or no sugar, lemon or no lemon, boiling water or cooler water, mug or cup, loose leaf or bag. These debates can become oddly intense for a drink associated with calm. Humanity is funny like that. Give us a soothing beverage, and we will immediately form factions. The cup in your hands carries empires, but it also carries kitchens. That is its great paradox. Tea helped build trading companies, tax systems, plantation economies, and global markets. It became involved in colonialism, smuggling, war, labour migration, advertising, and industrial production. Yet for billions of people, tea is not first remembered as geopolitics. It is remembered as a grandmother's hand, a rainy afternoon, a street vendor's call, a break at work, a visit from a friend, a fever, a book, a winter morning, a moment when life briefly became manageable. Historians still argue over how best to tell tea's global history. Some focus on elite rituals, trade routes, and imperial power. Others emphasize labour, gender, domestic life, ecology, and everyday consumption. The challenge is that tea belongs to all of these stories at once. It is too large for one frame and too intimate for only large explanations. It asks to be understood both as a world system and as a warm cup cooling beside someone's bed. You look closely at the surface of the tea. It trembles when your hand moves. Light gathers in it, then breaks. A faint ring forms where the liquid touches the cup. The smell changes as it cools, becoming softer, rounder, less sharp. The first sip was bright. The next is calmer. The final one will be quieter still. Tea teaches change without making a speech about it, which is very considerate. The leaf also carries the environment within it: soil, altitude, rainfall, insects. Pruning, shade, drought, and climate all affect flavour. Tea is agricultural memory. A dry year can speak through a cup. A misty mountain can leave its trace in aroma. A factory's firing technique can add smoke, sweetness, or depth. Even blended tea, standardized and boxed, is still built from weather that once touched living leaves. Modern tea culture is also changing. Specialty tea shops celebrate origin, processing, and small producers. Bubble tea turns tea into texture and play, with tapioca pearls rising through sweet milk tea like chewy little planets. Wellness markets praise herbal infusions, even when many are technically not tea because they do not come from Camellia sinensis. Ready-to-drink teas fill refrigerators. Ceremonial traditions continue beside convenience culture. The ancient leaf has learned to live with plastic lids, online reviews, and people photographing their cups from above. Yet the deepest appeal remains simple. Tea creates a pause. It asks water to heat, leaves to open, steam to rise, and hands to gather around warmth, even when made quickly. It slows the mind for a moment. It gives conversation somewhere to settle. It gives solitude a companion. It gives grief a small ritual, celebration a shared gesture, and exhaustion a gentle rescue. You feel the cup warming your palms, and the room grows softer. The sounds around you fade into small details: the tick of a clock, the whisper of fabric, the quiet breath of cooling tea. The steam thins. The fragrance lingers. Somewhere in that fragrance are misty hills, crowded ports, careful hands, long roads, bright kitchens, cold harbours, smoky inns, green fields, factory rooms, and millions of tables where people have lifted a cup and paused. Now the story settles like leaves resting at the bottom of a pot. The great empires grow distant. The ships lower their sails. The markets close their shutters. The plantations fall into evening mist. The kettles stop singing one by one across the turning earth. Your cup is nearly empty now, and the warmth has become gentle rather than bright. You breathe in slowly. The night around you is calm. The last trace of tea rests on your tongue, faintly bitter, faintly sweet, like memory itself. Let the steam fade. Let the room soften. Let the long roads of history become quiet paths under moonlight. The leaf has opened. The water has cooled. The world, for this small moment, can rest.